I... Well, look, it wasn't like we were doing anything illegal. Sometimes on our walks, Glimmer and I get a little amorous. This was technically our Valentine's Day, and we'd gone to the spring to watch the stars and have a picnic. So what if my clothes and my hair were a little rumpled? I don't kiss and tell, okay? And I won't go into details. But I had honestly expected Grandpa to be asleep by the time I got home. Glimmer was still a little flushed as we walked home, and I told her the story about the revelers that Grandpa had seen in the woods when he was younger. I know what you're thinking, and the answer is yes. I am so good at pillow talk. He said his grandmother called them moon revelers. Have you ever seen anything like them? Some of the flush had crept out of her cheeks as we spoke, and she nodded solemnly.
Yes, I know them. I have never seen one, but it's common knowledge to be careful when you hunt in the woods on a full moon. When I was little, my mother called them needle teeth and said they would come and get me if I was naughty. I have had more than one nightmare about the needle teeth since then.
Sounds like what he was talking about. I wonder why he didn't try to call you for help if he was trapped out there.
He would not have. Not then. Fisher and I were not on good terms then. We have fought over things, and we were not speaking.
She looked away when she said it, but she must have seen the question in my eyes, because she held up a hand.
I do not wish to talk about it. It was not a good time for Fisher and I. If he tells a story, then I may. But it's not of my business to tell.
We walked in silence for a little, our hands still linked, though it seemed the moment was ruined.
How is he? Fisher, I mean.
He's okay, I said, looking away too, as I lied.
His cough was very bad the other day. It has gotten worse since New Year's as well.
I squeezed her hand gently. I'm sure he'll be fine once it gets warm again. He seems to get a little sick when it gets cold. Glimmer nodded as the porch came into view.
I hope so. I am not ready to be without him. He has only just come back into my life, and he has brought you with him, for which I am very grateful.
She kissed me again, though not quite as passionately as she had in the woods earlier. I tried not to dwell on that either, or we might soon be reenacting some of that in the backyard. Will I see you tomorrow? I asked her, breaking the kiss after some time. She shook her head.
I must go with the hunters. It is nearly time for our spring fest, and I must secure the meat for the table. You will come to the spring fest, I would hope. The queen herself has offered you a personal invitation.
Can't very well not, then. Let me know when, and maybe I can even bring Gramps with me. I know he'd love to see the Moon Elf camp.
He would be most welcome. I will see you when I return, my love. Stay safe and look after Fisher. I want him to see the Moon Elves as much as you do.
She pressed another kiss on me before stepping away, disappearing into the woods and melting away like fog from a pond. When I came through the back door, setting down my shoes as quietly as I could, I tried my best to slink up the stairs. Apparently, I wasn't as quiet as I thought. How'd your date go, lover boy? I stopped, mid-slink like a cartoon character, turning back to the living room where Grandpa was sitting and reading. It's past 11, Gramps. You should be in bed. Sleep doesn't come as easy as it once did, kid. Sometimes I sit up after you've turned in. Sometimes I wake up before you do, but at my age, I don't need as much sleep as I used to. I sat down in the chair beside him, the one my grandmother had always sat in, and caught Grandpa looking at my neck before I could pull the collar of my coat up a little. Looks like the mosquitoes are early this year. They really did a number on you, boy, he said with a wink. Yeah, it was, certainly something, I said, hedging. Last time I saw a bite like that was when I had an unexpected guest in the cab while I was truck driving. I laughed. Let me find out. You've been contributing to lot lizards, Gramps. He smiled. No. I had offers, but I never strayed from your grandma. This lady, however, was a little more persistent than most, and turned out to be a little more dangerous, too. Sounds like another grandpa story, I said, sitting back comfy. Sounds like it, and it takes place in the most wholesome place of all, Nashville, Tennessee. I was running a load of fertilizer up to Nashville when it happened. I'd never been to Nashville, and I got a little distracted seeing the sights while I was there. It's an interesting place, and as they unloaded my truck, I took in the town. I had a nice lunch. I saw some famous places. I listened to some up-and-comers on the street, and when I checked my watch, I realized it was already 6 p.m. I rushed back to the lot to get my truck, and I managed to catch it just as they were chaining the gate up and heading home. They laughed, saying it happened a lot, and let me pull my truck out so I could head home. I had an 8-hour drive ahead of me, and I wanted to get back to the yard and home before morning. 4 hours into my drive, however, I suddenly got very tired. I don't mean my eyes got heavy or I got the yawns either. I mean, all of a sudden, I was irrationally tired. I was holding a cup of coffee when it happened, too. Had just finished one a couple of minutes before, but I was suddenly unable to keep my eyes open. Luckily, there was a truck stop up the way. I had just thought as much as I passed the advert sign, so I pulled in and hunted for a payphone so I could call home. Your grandmother picked up on the 4th ring and immediately asked me how late I was going to be. She didn't sound mad. She was used to it by now, and I told her I'd be about 8 at the earliest. She said that wasn't too bad, and to make sure Marvin paid me up front because the washer was on the fritz. I asked her what was wrong with the creek, and she hung up on me, but she did it kindly. I visited the bathroom and took a sink bath, got some of the sweaty smell off of me, and went to catch a couple hours of sleep in the sleeper cab so I could get rolling again. "Hey, handsome," someone called as I came out of the bathroom. "Need some company?" I turned around, expecting to find a woman in a little skirt looking for work, but my hackles immediately went up. She was wearing a dress, something long and flowery, and her hair was long and went almost to the ground. She was pale, too, and her teeth were far too bright in the moonlight. She was beautiful, too good-looking to be out here trolling for a trucker change, and I felt an immediate desire roll over me like a wave. I wanted her, I discovered, in a way I hadn't wanted anyone since I married your grandmother. She was more than beautiful. She was desirable, and that should have raised a red flag almost at once. "No," I stammered, walking shakily back to my truck. "No, thank you, ma'am. I'm a married man," I said, trying to regain my steel and put some distance between her and me. "You wouldn't be the first, sugar," she said, "but that's okay. I'm sure I'll see you later." I hurried back to my truck and locked the door. I was a little shaken by her forwardness, but I was safe now. So's I thought. I checked the doors, I snuggled down in the sleeper cab and tried to think sleepy thoughts. It wasn't hard, but every time I would almost doze off, I would hear the woman's voice as she called to some new potential client. "Need some company, sugar?" I rolled over, trying to get comfy. "Hey, handsome, how about a date?" There should have been no way I could hear her, but I could. "Oh, boys, I'll keep you company if you want." As I finally dozed off, I heard her voice still, like it was wafting over me. Married men, widowed men, boys, old-timers with one foot in the grave, young men going off to war, young men going off to whore. It makes no difference to me. I couldn't be sure if I was dreaming or not, but suddenly I opened my eyes and there she was. She was standing over my bed. Her dress was gone. In the dark, however, her features were like cold tar. She possessed galaxies within that sludge, and her features were only the vaguest of shapes, like some pagan idol carved from rough wood with crude tools and impractical hands. I take them, and I ride them, and I suck them dry. As she said it, she was suddenly upon me. Her body balanced over top of me, and she was indeed riding me, not to be too graphic. She leaned down and pressed her mouth to my neck, suckling there as she made me warm. I groaned softly, feeling a new level of tiredness fall over me. She made some rough approximation of love to me. I became aware that this was no dream. It was slow in coming, like a man swimming through molasses, but when I surfaced, her glamour was suddenly broken. Gone was the beautiful woman I had desired, and in its place was a haggard crone. Not even a crone. That would have been better. This was a corpse of a crone, animated, brought back from the brink. Her swinging dugs seemed in constant threat of coming loose, and her body was hunched and wrinkled in the extreme. Her flowing hair was brittle and coarse, her body dry as an old stick, and she looked at me with her half-mad eyes, and I realized what had hold of me. Grandma, you see, had warned me about these sorts of spirits, but it had still nearly gotten me while I was unaware. I looked back into those eyes and realized she had seen that I was aware, and that I had seen her. "It matters not," she whispered, groaning and moving against me. "I have you right where I want you. You are mine." Her hands began to creep towards my throat, and as her icy fingers encircled my neck, I crept my own hand up and under my shirt. Her hands were like ice cubes, but they were as strong as iron. They were cutting off my air, choking me to death, but as the leather thong snapped and I pulled out my cross, I felt them falter. "Get behind me, demon! You have no power here!" I gasped out, my air slow to return to me. "I put you from this place in Jesus' name!" The woman screamed, flying against the back wall of the sleeper cab like a leaf in a windstorm. She crouched there, panting, her eyes wide in disbelief. She had clearly not expected me to know what she was or how to rid myself of her, but I was no fool. I brandished my cross, mumbling pseudo-Latin for good measure, and finished my push as I made ready for one more press. I banish you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Be gone, Boohag! I screamed. She screamed. But it didn't last long. She shriveled to nothing, her body dissolving before my eyes. And as quickly as she had appeared, she was gone. I found, as I sat there breathing, that I was not as tired as I thought I was. I surprised your grandmother that morning by rolling in before 6 a.m., and when she asked me about the marks on my neck, I told her some crazy lady had tried to kiss me at the truck stop when I went to use the phone. I pushed her off and drove away so she wouldn't bother me. It wasn't technically a lie, and she seemed content enough with it. I checked into it, and the Boohag never bothered anyone around that truck stop again. That particular stop had a bad reputation for missing truckers and bodies found the next day after a supposed heart attack. But after my encounter with the creature, the attacks stopped. I can't prove it. This was before the internet, but I think I either banished her or put her off her hunting ground for good. I felt a little cold as I sat there listening to how Grandpa had almost been gotten by something nasty. That's an interesting story, but you could have just told me that you picked up some strange on the road, and I wouldn't have questioned it. Grandpa snorted. I had offers. I wasn't an ugly guy, but no, I was always loyal to your grandma and my family, and I always will be. I smiled. Good luck for me, I suppose. Good luck for all of us, Grandpa said sleepily, closing his book and heading off to bed. Good night, kid. Night, Gramps, I said, quietly sitting in the dark and trying not to picture some shrunken woman looking at me through the window as I hunkered with my thoughts. It was the start of the fall semester when Ruth met Gerta. It was Ruth's first year at the University of Georgia, and she was looking forward to living the college lifestyle. College events, parties at sorority houses, studying something that appealed to her, and really just being free for the first time in her life. Ruth had come from a religiously strict family, and when she'd received a free ride scholarship for exemplary scholastic achievement, Ruth knew what she wanted to do, where she wanted to go to college, and it was somewhere besides West Virginia. She had applied to several schools, but when the University of Georgia sent her an acceptance letter, Ruth knew that would suit her needs just fine. So, she'd packed up the essentials, said goodbye to Ma and Pa, as well as her 5 siblings, and made the 14-hour drive to her new life in a new state. She arrived to learn that she would be staying not in a dorm room, but in a campus house on the edge of the grounds. It's a lovely place. It holds 5 single rooms with a common area, a bathroom, and a kitchen. You should be right at home, and it'll feel much less cramped than a traditional dorm room. Ruth wasn't sure how she felt about that, but she'd come from a big family and didn't feel it would be too odd to live with other people. The house was beautiful, more like an apartment than a dorm room, and as she arrived, she saw that some of her dorm mates had arrived early. A mousy-looking girl with glasses was coming down the stairs as Ruth came up and introduced herself as Dawn, as she helped the other girl with her luggage. I arrived yesterday, she admitted, explaining that she had taken the West Room. The rooms were set up like a compass. the kitchen and the bathroom occupying the north and the south rooms, and the northwest room occupying the entrance. The common room was in the middle, and the tall, red-haired girl in the short skirt was watching TV when she introduced herself as Helen. "I took the east room," she said, as if it didn't matter whether that was okay or not. Ruth ended up taking the northeast room and found it just as cozy and charming as the others. There was a loft bed with a built-in desk at the bottom, a closet for clothes and storage, and a small floor area that was big enough to pull out a table or a small desk if you needed to. Ruth hadn't brought a lot, just some clothes and some study things, and found that most of her stuff fit easily in the closet, or at the bottom of it. She'd heard someone else coming up as she unpacked, and came out to find a new girl sitting in the common area talking to Helen. She introduced herself as Sara, and she was short with dark hair and overalls, her hair braided in long pigtails that ran down the back of her legs. Some of them had brought groceries with them, and some of them, Ruth included, went out to buy some things for the house. They came back with food and candles and things to spruce up the common room, and they all had fun cooking dinner and decorating. It wasn't until after dinner, the fire in the fireplace burning as they roasted marshmallows, that Ruth asked who the fifth girl would be. "I haven't seen her, so I assume she's late, but does anybody know her name or anything about her?" "Her name's Gerta," Dawn said. Dawn was their acting dorm representative and had access to these kind of things. She hasn't reported to student services either, as far as I know. She may be a no-show, so I suppose they will probably reassign her room to someone else in a few days. "Well, I hope they aren't too different from us," Farrah said, looking around nervously after realizing what she had said. "You know what I mean. We all seem to get along well, and I just hope it isn't a weirdo or something." The girls nodded, understanding her meaning. They decided to head to bed not long after, the first day being tomorrow, and as Ruth settled into the room, she reflected on how neat it was going to be to have her own little dorm room. The other girls had seemed so nice, and if the fifth girl was anything like the rest, then they'd have a nice little family here in the dorm. As she hunkered down under her blankets, Ruth couldn't help but think about all the fun things they were going to do that year, and drifted off to sleep, dreaming of carnivals and parties and time spent with her new friends. Sometime in the wee hours, she was woken up suddenly by a loud noise from the common room. Looking at her alarm clock, she realized it was 2 a.m. and tried to roll over and go back to sleep. As she closed her eyes, however, she heard again the sound of someone moving around in the common room. Ruth thought that it must be someone who was getting water and tried to go back to sleep. The longer she lay there listening, however, the less it sounded like a person, and the more it sounded like something huge. It was clomping around, knocking things over, tipping things over. Ruth put her head under a pillow, trying to block out the sound, but no matter what she tried, she couldn't stop the noise from bombarding her ears. She was just about to get up and see who was making all that racket when she heard a door open and close, the sound abruptly stopping. She sighed, rolling over and falling back to sleep almost at once. Tomorrow was going to be an important day, and she wanted to be well rested for it. Ruth woke up to the smells of her childhood: sausage, eggs, pancakes, biscuits, hash browns, and all of it topped off by the overwhelming aroma of bacon. She looked at the clock and saw that it was 6:30, the light coming in a welcome sight. As she climbed out of bed, she wondered which one of the girls had decided to make breakfast. She pulled her robe on and came out to find Dawn and Farrah already eating around the table outside the kitchen. They had plates filled with food, and as Ruth approached them, they waved her over. "Gerta's been cooking for close to an hour. This food is amazing, Ruth." Ruth looked over at the stove and saw a girl in a homespun dress standing before the oven. She wasn't large as in big, but large proportionally. Her body seemed longer than it should be, the girl standing almost 6.5 feet tall. Her arms were long to match. Ruth couldn't see her legs, but she assumed that they were similarly lengthened, and the girl just looked a little off. She had her hair pulled back in a very no-nonsense bun, like a schoolmarm, but when she turned to bring Ruth her plate, she saw the girl was far from severe. In fact, she had an ear-to-ear grin that made Ruth afraid that the top of her head might come tumbling off if it got any wider. "It's a pleasure to meet you this fine morning. I'm Gerta. I must apologize for my lateness. I do hope I didn't keep you up last night. It's so hard for my people to travel without vehicles, so we did not arrive until late. I trust this hearty breakfast will make up for my rudeness." Ruth nodded, thanking her for the meal, but feeling a little taken aback. Ruth had seen a lot of girls in homespun dresses where she was raised, and the sight of another filled her with sudden panic. She sat down with her plate to eat, but suddenly felt like eating was the last thing that she wanted to do. She hoped she was wrong. Maybe the girl was just from a farming community, but she wondered nonetheless. As Gerta came to join them, Ruth noticed her plate was empty. "Aren't you eating?" Ruth asked, trying not to wince as Gerta turned to look at her. She turned her neck like it might be hurting her. "Oh, I ate before any of you got up. I was hungry after moving my things in last night, and I was a teensy bit ravenous when I woke up. Here is the final sleepyhead," she said, as Helen came stumbling from her room. "Good morning, I'm Gerta. I want to apologize for being so loud last night as I came in and made breakfast as a—" Sure, yeah, don't let it happen again," Helen said, stumbling in her fuzzy pajamas as she passed up the plate on the counter and took the orange juice out of the fridge. "Well then," Gerta said, looking around the table at the others, "would you mind if I said a little prayer over the food?" Most of them had already started eating, but politely swallowed what they had in their mouths and bowed their head. It seemed that Ruth hadn't been the only one to grow up in a religious household, or at least with parents who had taught them manners. "Oh, Bright, thank you for the food we are about to receive. We pray that you shine your light on us and grant us strength and wisdom in our pursuits today. Bright be praised," she finished, and the girls tentatively started eating again. All but Helen. "I'm sorry, the what?" Helen asked, picking up some of the bacon and crunching into it. "The Bright," Gerta said, twisting her head in a mechanical way to look at Helen. "Yeah, never heard of it. Is that some kind of new religion or something?" "Oh, the Bright is an old religion, old as time itself. It's been around for generations and guided my people to salvation. I can tell you about it if you like." "No thanks," Helen said, taking a few more pieces of bacon and heading back to her room. "My first class isn't until 11 today, ladies, so if you guys could keep all the racket to a minimum, I'd appreciate it," she said, before returning to her room. "Guess she's not a morning person," Dawn said, scraping some of the hash browns onto her fork. "I've never heard of the Bright before, Gerta. Is it an Eastern religion of some kind, like Buddhism or Taoism? Some kind of earth religion, like paganism, maybe?" Gerta smiled at her, but Ruth found the smile not altogether savory. "I don't know what you mean. The Bright is simply the worship of the Bright. It is what it is, and those who know the Bright stay on the farm we have set up around the Bright Chapel." Dawn and Farah exchanged a look that Ruth had seen before, a look that said cult loud enough for anyone to hear. "Well, we better be getting to class, Gerta," Dawn said, pushing her plate away. "I've got AP Lit at 7, and Farah has Introductory to Nursing at 7:30. "Ruth, when is your first class?" she asked leadingly. Not till 8, but I really wanted to see the library before I went to English Lit." "We'd better get going then. Thanks for the breakfast, Gerta. If you want to leave the dishes, we can get to them after class." The girl fixed Dawn with her smile, and Ruth saw the girl make a concerted effort not to flinch. "That will not be necessary. I will do the dishes and tidy up before class today. I hope to see you all for dinner tonight," she said, rising to begin getting things tidied up. The three girls departed quickly, Dawn and Farah speaking quietly about their new roommate as they left the housing block. "I don't know about her," Farah said. "She cooks good, but she's very strange." "I feel bad for her," Dawn said. "I don't think she knows that she might be in a cult. Weird farm, special chapel, odd religions. I took a semester of religious studies, and I've never heard of anything even close to that." "You don't think she could be dangerous, do you?" Farah asked, pitching her voice low. "I don't think so," Dawn said, looking at Ruth as if she wanted a second opinion. "What do you think, Ruth?" "I don't know," said Ruth, looking up at the housing block as if expecting to see Gerta looming in one of the windows. "Something about her does seem a little off." The next few days passed without much to speak of. Gerta cooked their meals, cleaned the common area and the bathrooms, and would have cleaned the girls' rooms if they had let her. She would ambush them sometimes on the way out, cleaning implements in hand, offering to clean their rooms while they were out, but all of them had declined. They didn't quite trust the new girl and her painful smile, and the four of them often found excuses to be out of the housing pod. "She's a freak," Helen said, having met them for lunch before her first class. Helen was taking some sort of sports medicine physical therapy course, and most of her classes were in the afternoon. Despite this, she still rose early and opted to be out of the dorm until it was time for her to go to class. It was becoming obvious that she wasn't sleeping the amount that she had become accustomed to, and it was taking a toll on her health. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her hair looked wild and unkempt. "Helen," Dawn said, clearly shocked. "Well, she is. She just cleans the house with that weird smile on her face and talks about the bright. She's ambushed me twice now to see if I have a minute to talk about the bright with her. She tried to do the same to me in the bathroom the other day," Farah admitted. "Yeah," Dawn said. "She asked me while I was watching TV yesterday." Ruth had them all beat there. Gerta had asked her if she could speak with her about the bright on 4 separate occasions. Usually it was while she was leaving the bathroom or leaving for class, but she had approached her today as she left to go have lunch, and her response had been bizarre. Ruth had told her that she had somewhere to be, and the girl had followed her with those weird eyes until she was almost to the door before dropping her bombshell. "I don't know why you resist the bright so hard. You already have a spark in you. All people do. They pretend they don't, but the bright knows. They hear its call and feel its warmth. I know you want to belong again. Why not just give in and make it easy?" Ruth had said nothing, but her hands had been very sweaty as she tried to grab the doorknob. "I don't think what she's offering is entirely in our best interest," Ruth said softly, as if the girl might appear behind them and get offended. "No, duh," Helen said. "What's more is that I don't know when she's going to class. I leave at 10:30 and she's still there. She doesn't leave in the morning. She's always there when I get back. I guess she could be going to class in the early afternoon, but she's there when I get back at 4, Farah said suddenly. "And when I get back at 2, Ruth said, though with a little more hesitation. "See what I mean?" Helen said. "If she's attending classes, then they either have to be online or she's missing them. Why come to school to cook and clean for a group of college girls?" They didn't know, but they'd find out shortly. It started with a flu. Farah caught a nasty bug 2 weeks into semester, and by Friday of the second week, she was in bed shivering and coughing. Her parents were from several states away and couldn't just drop whatever they were doing to come and take care of their ailing daughter. They told her to visit the clinic and get some medicine, but that hadn't done much to help her. Her roommates were worried about her, all of them but Gerta, and as Saturday began, her cough had only gotten worse. "What should we do?" Dawn asked, her voice muffled behind her mask. They'd all been trying family remedies, hot tea, herbal mixtures, and different over-the-counter measures, but nothing seemed to be working. They were all terrified that they would get it too, and they all wore masks and gloves anytime they had to go near Farah. Her temperature was around 103, and nothing seemed to be bringing it down. Saturday night, they took her to the bathroom and put her in a lukewarm bath, and for a moment it seemed to work, but once removed, her temperature climbed right back up again. "We have to do something," Ruth said. "Her fever's starting to creep up again. If it gets much higher, we need to take her to the ER." "Will they even take her if we bring her in? We aren't exactly her parents," Helen said. "I could try something," a voice behind them said, and they all jumped as they realized that Gerta had snuck up on them. The girl loomed up behind them, grinning down at the group as she offered her services. "And what can you do that the rest of us can't?" Helen challenged. "I didn't realize you were studying medicine in the short time you've spent in your room each day." "Through the Bright, all things are possible. If she will accept the Bright's help, then she might be cured." "What a load of crap," Helen spat, Dawn trying to hold her back. "Helen, if she can help, we should—" "All she's going to do is say some prayers and call for some healing, and Farah will still be sick. Let's just take her to the ER. Maybe they'll—" But Gerta never gave her a chance. She pushed into Farah's room, gliding like an angel on her way for those in need. Farah looked up from the bed, her face conveying terror, but she was too weak to do anything about it. Gerta knelt beside her, her long fingers stroking the girl's hair as she bent down and whispered something to her. Farah looked at us, stunned, but when Gerta said something else to her, the girl nodded, clutching her hand, as Gerta soothed her with more whispered words. "What are you doing?" Helen asked, taking a step towards the door. "What are you doing to her?" Gerta turned to face Helen, but though she was still smiling, her eyes blazed like coals. "Let me work now, Helen. The Bright has work to do." One of her long arms reached out and slammed the door in her face, and as Helen banged on the closed portal, Dawn clutched Ruth's arm and pointed to the base of the door. "Look," she whispered, and Ruth could see the bright flashes of light that erupted from beneath the door. Inside, something was going on, something none of the girls could understand. As the flashes grew in brightness, they all retreated back to the living room, huddled on the couch as they waited for it all to end. They could see it around the door now, peeking from any hole it could find. They were completely terrified, and Ruth couldn't help but remember passages about the shepherd being afraid of the angel and his light. Would that someone had approached to tell them not to be afraid, because they needed it more than they ever had needed any reassurance in their life. Gerta didn't emerge from that sick room until Monday morning, and when she did, Farah was healed of her ailment. It was a shame that they would never see Farah as they had known her again. "You're getting better," Marcus said. Marcus had said it many, many times before, but each time I heard it, I believed it a little less. I'd been trying for weeks, but I didn't seem to be getting any better. I wanted to learn. I had wanted to learn magic since I was 6, but just didn't seem to have an affinity for it. Winter was finally coming to an end, it seemed, and spring was right around the corner. Before long, it would be time for sowing crops and basking in the sun, but winter seemed to be digging its fingers in this year. It was well past the time for things to warm up, but sometimes winter would insist upon itself, and the chill just wouldn't leave without a fight. Grandpa was sitting on the porch, bundled up and coughing irregularly. I knew Marcus was hoping that warmer weather would help with that cough, but winter seemed to be intent on making the groundhogs earn their keep this year. "Okay, try to stop this next one. Remember, it's just a shield that you form in front of you to keep anything from touching you. Form it in your mind and push." I tried, shaking a little as I tried to make the shield. I'd been having some luck slowing down the things that Marcus threw at me, but I had yet to stop anything. There hadn't been any snow in a while, so the snowballs had stopped coming about a month ago. Marcus had thought about pine cones for half a second, but we had agreed that those looked like they would hurt. Baseballs had been his next pitch. See what I did there? But if you've never been hit by a slightly less fast fastball, then you know it doesn't feel real great. We had finally settled on those rubber balls that people use for wall ball, and they were okay. They stung a little, but it was a small price to pay for protection. "Why don't you boys take a break?" Grandpa called. "I've got iced tea." Marcus looked at me, and I nodded, the two of us mounting the porch as we went to sit with him. Grandpa was drinking a tall glass of tea himself, and after a couple of hours of getting rubber balls thrown at me, I was glad to take a break. The tea was sweet and cold, and as I sat back, I smacked my lips in satisfaction. "So how are your runes coming?" Grandpa asked. "Pretty good," I answered. Marcus shook his head. "Better than all right. He's a natural, Gramps. His runes are way smoother than mine." "Yeah," I said, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "They would be if I could get energy into them." I could put out energy. I'd done it before, but engaging the runes took a particular focus. You had to put intention behind it, and I wasn't sure how to do that. Marcus had told me to imagine I was filling a water bottle with water that came from my palm. But visualizing something, while having no idea what I was doing, was difficult. "So, I heard someone found a lost kid a couple of weeks back. They say the kid was in the stairwell," Grandpa added with a little wink. I laughed. I had some help. "Run up on any boogans in there?" Marcus asked, his glass already half empty. "Just my old friend, the orderly," I said, glad I had found him. "He was trying to help the kid, but the kid was kind of freaked out by him." "It is hard to look upon a guide in his true form and not feel a sense of dread and foreboding." Grandpa always says they look off. When Lovecraft talks about strange geometry, I have to think that he saw one of them somewhere. They can be helpful, but they can often fall victim to hubris, I've heard. They decide that they can use their powers to gain more power, and for that, they're often damned, Marcus said. Who do they serve?" I asked, leaning in with real interest. Glimmer had her hackles up when she saw him, and it takes a lot to get her riled. Grandpa laughed. "I imagine she would be a little upset at the presence of one of them. Moon children are long-lived, and they fight death and its servants tooth and nail. As to who they serve, well, that's open to debate. Death is a natural end to things, and the guides are an extension of that. Some believe they serve evil, but most are simply gray. They do their job, and they return to their homes when not guiding. They are what they are, and it's hard for them to be anything else." We sat and let that sink in for a minute, the sun feeling good as it peeked through the trees. "How's that woman that came out of the stairwell?" Marcus asked. "Did you say she came back to the hospital?" I nodded. "Frankie," I said, feeling a smile on my face as I said it. "And yeah, she decided to come back and take up her old position. It's been a process, but I think she's learning it pretty quickly." Marcus smiled knowingly. "Sounds like she's got a good teacher. It also sounds like you don't mind too much." "Sounds like our little mageling might be smitten," Grandpa said, cutting through the fat. I made a rude noise. "No, that would be highly inappropriate, for one, and for two," I paused, chewing over the reasoning. "For two, she's like a fish out of water. I'd feel bad taking advantage of her like that. And what if she didn't feel the same way?" Grandpa asked. I thought about some of the smiles we had exchanged lately, the coy remarks, the lingering looks, but I shook my head. No, it couldn't be. This is real life, not some movie. Right, Marcus said, because real people fight ghosts and use magic. I rolled my eyes at him. She must be brave, Grandpa said suddenly. I think she is. I wasn't asking, kid, Grandpa said, to go back into a place that stole your life and your time and just work every day next to the device that could take it again. That takes grit. This girl sounds like she's got moxie. You could do worse, kid. I think that's enough talk about my love life, or lack of one, I said, finishing my tea. Let's get back to the real magic. I'd like to feel like I'm making some progress here. Marcus nodded, getting up and draining his glass before putting it down. A moment, kid, Grandpa said, and it took a moment for me to realize he meant me. Like moon elves, it seemed that Grandpa could give nicknames too. Marcus was son, and it seemed I was to be kid. Marcus went down to stretch a little and collect his rubber ball, and I stood beside Grandpa as he thought about how to proceed. I've been watching you, kid. You've got the magic, but I think it's different than my grandson's. What do you mean? I asked, not understanding. Well, Marcus forms magic to use it. He makes the walls and the shields and the curtains of air, the walls of flame and things like that. He can use it in other ways, but generally he puts his magic in front of him. Your magic, however, isn't like that. I can see it. Your magic is like a whip. You extend it out, but it's not as durable as his. Your magic is more precise, but it's also less defensive. Try this, he said, and he pointed his finger like a gun. When Marcus throws the ball, shoot at it like you would with a gun. Shoot it out of the air instead of blocking it, and see if that doesn't help. I shrugged. I'll try. Try not, Grandpa said in a passable Yoda impression. Do or do not. There is no try. I laughed. Don't expect any backpack rides from me anytime soon, but I will try. I stepped up before Marcus as he prepared to throw. He took his best pitcher's mound stance and even adjusted a make-believe hat and shook his head a few times as if he were looking for signs before throwing the ball at me. I extended my finger, looking like a kid playing cowboy when he's too broke to afford a cap gun, and pulled the trigger. I jumped a little as I felt something, a whisper maybe, pass through my finger gun before grunting as the ball whumped against me. No, Grandpa said, getting up so he could lean against the porch rail. He started to speak, but coughed instead before hacking and spitting into the grass. No, not like that. Do you wonder if the bullet is going to come out of the gun? Do you question if the arrow is going to come from the bow? No, because you loaded it. Load your gun and shoot, and trust that it will fire. Gramps, what are you... Marcus started, but Grandpa shushed him before returning to his seat. Get your ball and try again. John, feel the energy, push it out, and trust in yourself. You have the power. Now show us what you already know. Marcus came to get the ball, and I looked at my hand as I tried to decide how to begin. Well, like I always had, I supposed. I'd been shooting with Dad and my own grandpa since I was very young, and it always began the same way. You had to load the gun, or it wasn't going to work. I looked at my hand, and then I did something I hadn't done before. I closed my eyes, and I opened my sight. The hand was still just a hand, but I could see a faint glow around it. I'd been using the sight to see ghosts for so long that I never imagined I could use it for other things. Sure enough, though, I could see the energy in my hand like a tube of neon. Across from me, I could see Marcus as he practically glowed with energy, and most of it seemed to reside in his midsection. I thought about it and pulled some of my own energy from my core. It flowed up my arm like soda to a straw, and as the ball came at me, I pointed and squeezed. There was a sound like a tin can hitting the ground, and the ball flew off in the opposite direction. We just stood there, looking at each other in surprise, before Marcus whooped and pumped an arm in the air. "That was brilliant! I can't believe you did that. It took me ages to figure that out." Grandpa laughed from the porch. "His power is different than yours, son, just like my power is different than yours. Powers are unique, like I told you. Now that you know how to train him, get started." The next 30 minutes switched from blocking practice to target practice. I could have gladly gone on all afternoon, but after about 20 minutes, I was out of breath. Pushing that much energy out took a toll, and I was beginning to see. And the shots got less and less potent the longer I pushed at them. After a half hour, I was out of breath, and I could feel the sweat building on my arms. Grandpa told us to knock off and have some more tea, and I was more than happy to oblige. "You made some real progress," he said, putting one of the runes from earlier on my knee. "You should have much more luck with these now." I picked it up and saw that he was right. Loading the runes was similar to loading the gun, and I could see the energy as it flowed through it. It was like flipping on a switch, and I could tell what Grandpa had been talking about all this time. Now that I could see the energy, I could see how to move it, and I couldn't unsee it. I leaned back as Grandpa set off on another one of his stories and felt a deep satisfaction, a sense of accomplishment. Magic is hard, like most things that are worth having, but when you finally discover the secrets of the universe, it's pretty cool. "I never imagined I would see 2 practitioners in my lifetime," Grandpa said, and Marcus chuckled as he set his tea glass down. "You've got plenty of time left, Gramps. You might have time to see your great-grandkids learn a few things before your time comes." "Here's hoping," Grandpa said, and I would think about this later and feel a deep sense of unease and sorrow. The look he gave the horizon didn't seem too hopeful. F01. Sending. I counted to 5, and when nothing came back, I scrubbed a line through it. "No contact. F02. Sending." I sent the packet, counted to 5. When nothing came back, I scrubbed a line through it. "No contact. F03. If this sounds like tedious work to you, then that's because it is. I've spent the better part of 5 years getting my degree in things like string theory and space anomalies, but those kinds of degrees require money. That money has to come from somewhere, and in my case, that somewhere was a job at a scientific research lab, when I wasn't working on my doctorate, of course. I mostly worked on the weekends, doing different things that fell under the heading of my field of study, but a lot of the work came with NDAs and contracts stating how I would never speak of anything I worked on outside the facility, or to anyone without similar clearance inside the facility, for that matter. I could probably get in a lot of trouble for talking about what I'm about to talk about, but I think it needs to be told. You guys need to know what's going on, because it could potentially affect everyone on this planet. For the last 6 months, I've been involved in something called the Bottle Project. The Bottle Project is, as its name implies, about sending messages out to try to get a response. Messages to who, you might ask? Well, messages to other life forms outside of our dimension. The research facility that I work at has a machine. It's a machine that I don't understand, and it's a machine that I don't ask a lot of questions about. What it amounts to is a big metal hatch with an apparatus similar to an iron lung connected to the wall. When you use the machine, you send a message through the iron lung and into the hatch. The messages are sent in a similar fashion to phone calls. It was decided that if whoever was receiving the messages was on a technological level like ours, then they should be able to encounter and decipher something on the basis of a sound call and return a similar message. Your next question will undoubtedly be, well, who are we sending these messages to? And the answer to that might surprise you. I'd been working here for a couple of weeks before I found out myself. Most people are tight-lipped about it, but I had found common ground with my then manager and got some answers out of him in a very unscientific way. We went out for drinks one night after work, and I asked him who we were sending all these voicemails to. He laughed, and he told me that at the start of the project, they were sending them into space, deep space. We were hoping to get messages back from helpful aliens who might tell us how to go to the stars or how to advance our civilization. What we got was a bunch of dead air for the next 20-some-odd years. Turns out, nobody was in a big hurry to help us. They either aren't there or they don't care, and it amounts to the same thing. So that's when one of the old heads, Dr. Klein, had a great idea to invent that machine that you sit about 5 feet away from every day. He decided that maybe the answer wasn't in another species, but in our own. I asked him what he meant, and he glanced around like he was looking for eavesdroppers before he went on. I shouldn't be telling you this. No one is supposed to know this without some pretty heavy clearance. But that machine sends messages to other dimensions. I thought he was pulling my leg for a minute, having a little fun with the new guy, but he assured me that he was 100% on the level. I know what it sounds like. I didn't believe it myself when they first told me. But I swear, it's the truth. Dr. Klein decided that there had to be a dimension out there where we had figured out faster than light travel. He decided that if we could send messages to one of those universes, then maybe they would help us out. That was 2010, and we've been sending those messages in a bottle ever since. I asked him if he'd ever gotten a response, and he gave me this look that was equal parts pity and amusement. How long you been working on the project? I told him about a month. How many messages have you received? I told him none. The letter in front of the dimension should tell you how many times we've done this. Each collective is given an alphabet letter, and each letter has about 99 confirmed locations. I believe you're up to D now, and to my knowledge, we've only received about 5 responses in the whole life of the project. I asked him about those responses, but not even the liquor could make him talk about those. You're a good kid, but if I told you, you'd probably quit tomorrow. Those messages... He got a faraway look before taking another drink. They're the kind of thing that you have to experience for yourself. That had excited me a little bit. I really wanted to get a response, so I kept sending my messages out into the universe, waiting for the day when I might get my own response back. What could these other places tell us? What knowledge could they share, and what secrets might they help us uncover? It was pretty exciting. At least it was then. That had been 6 months ago, and I'd been plodding along through the alphabet ever since. Every now and again I would get something, and that was the kind of thing that kept me going. Every now and again I would get static or a weird tone, and per protocol I would log it and send it to my supervisor. If they actually learned anything from them, they never said. They always just thanked me and told me to keep at it. I kept at it, but I never felt like I was getting anywhere. That's how I came to be sitting at my desk at 23:45 on a Saturday. That's how I came to be at my station when I got my first response. F04, sending. I was counting, about to scrub through and move on, when I heard something on the other end. It was weak, like a voice heard over the radio. but it was the most that I had ever heard, and it filled me with a sense of excitement and dread. I picked up the microphone, something I had never done before, and spoke into it haltingly. Hello? Can you read me? More static, some garbled words, and then it seemed to clear up, as if they were adjusting instruments on their end. Hello? Hello! This is Eden Listening Station in the Sol system, Earth. Who am I speaking with? It was my turn to go silent for a moment. That was English. Not just a human voice, but an English-speaking voice as well. I had been told that if I got a message back, it might not be in a language that I understood. I'd been told it might not be understandable at all, that it might even make me sick or make my head hurt. To get a message that sounded like it could be from someone no farther away than the next office over was amazing. Hello? Are you still there? I keyed up the mic, not wanting to lose them because of a misunderstanding. Yeah, sorry. You surprised me. This is Post M at the Medici Labs, a subsidiary of the United States government. I tried to think of what to say. Am I speaking with someone from a different dimension? The voice on the other end sounded amused. I could ask you the same question. We had assumed this transmission was from deep space, but I suppose it would be more advantageous if it was from another dimension entirely. Are you from Earth? My hands shook as I remembered to turn on the recorder. My bosses would have been pretty upset if I had made contact and forgotten to record the exchange in my surprise. Yes. This is Earth. This is specifically the United States of America. The year is 2022, and the president is Joseph Biden. The voice on the other end laughed again, but seemed to think that it might be rude as it ended quickly. Sorry, but we don't have presidents anymore, so such an antiquated term seems a little silly. It's good to hear that you're from Earth. We haven't called ourselves the United States in over 100 years. We're now the Eden Collective of Nations. That was amazing. I'd never guessed that something like this could happen. I was dumbstruck for a moment as I tried to decide how to continue. The person on the other end of the transmission, however, didn't seem to have any such hang-ups. I wonder, what is the purpose of your contacting us, if I might ask? I believe we're seeking to share technology and ideas, I hedged, wondering how much I was supposed to share with the voice on the radio. I believe my supervisors are hoping to find a means of faster-than-light travel. Oh, is that all? The voice said, almost laughing. Well, perhaps we can help each other out. I'd love to speak more on the matter, but I do believe I am below the rank to do so. Is there someone you might put me through to, a supervisor or some such thing, so that we may continue this on a more official channel? I told him that that's probably what my supervisor would want as well, and asked if they would hold while I made contact with the higher-ups. The next few weeks were extremely hectic. I was given a bonus and told to take a couple of weeks off for some well-earned rest. People shook my hand and told me that I'd done a great service to my country, but I just felt like I'd been doing my job. I'd really just been sending messages out without any hope of getting anything back, but it was hard to forget the voice on the other end as I sat for a couple of days and tried to keep it to myself. The voice had sounded familiar, even like somebody that I might know, but it had also sounded like one of those old radio broadcasts from the World War times. The newsreel stuff. The accent had definitely been American, but it had been laced with a strange underlay of British and maybe something else. I told myself it wasn't so hard to believe. If there had been a coalition of nations, then the English language would probably have been pretty mixed up. Still, it was hard to shake the World War II similarities in my head. The voice had sounded like it wanted to offer me war bonds or something, and, well, I'd expected to come back after a couple of days and maybe get to talk to them again. That wasn't going to happen, though. F04 had been reclassified as a high priority, and communication with them was on a strictly need-to-know basis. I was told to return to my workstation and continue to send messages into the void, but there was a new addition to my desk. There was a little black box with a flashing light on it, a label maker stamp declaring it to be the line to F04, in case of direct communication. If it rang, I was to pick it up immediately and send it to whoever was on the other end upstairs. My hours had been changed to reflect a small promotion. I had now been placed on the 3 to 11 shift, something that would fit in much better with my college hours. I had been on midnights before that, and it had been hard to adjust to a midday sleep schedule while still maintaining my schoolwork. Now I could come in after my last class and get to bed before daylight. All in all, it was a pretty good system. And so, I got back to work, started hunting for another signal. I started sending out messages to the rest of F. Whoever had been doing it while I was away was up to F89, and I fell back into the general expectation of short bursts of static or nothing at all. I kept hoping for another voice on the other end, but as the first shift went on, I began to wonder if I'd ever find another return message. It was about 9:30, and I'd been thinking about getting off soon, when suddenly, the F4 phone began to chirp. My current supervisor was very different from the red-faced man I'd drunk with. He had said that if it had happened, I was to pick it up immediately and transfer it upstairs. I picked it up, preparing to send the call to the higher-ups, but before I could tell them to hold on and that I was transferring them, I heard something strange on the other end. There was no plummy war bond salesman on the end of this call, and what I heard got my neck hairs up a bit. It was mechanical, though the voice was human enough to make me wonder. The cadence, however, was too perfect to be anything but a machine. But who could really say? Boots, 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 moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. Hello? I said, thinking perhaps I'd crossed the signal somewhere. Just a minute while I transfer you upstairs. If there was actually someone on the other end, they didn't say anything. They just kept repeating whatever it was they were reading from. Don't. Look at what's in front of you. I asked again if they needed something, but they just kept right on, going on with the poem or message or whatever it was. The cadence made it sound like a military march, something that Marines might step to as they went about their physical training. And again, the hairs on the back of my neck lifted up. I'd heard it before. It was something old that I couldn't place. And as I listened, it went on. Men go mad with watching them. Boots, moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it began again from the beginning. I didn't ask if anybody was on the line. I just transferred it upstairs as I sat for the next hour and a half with a sense of cold dread wafting through me. I didn't know what I had just heard, but it didn't seem to be from the same as first contact. This hadn't been a person like the one that I'd first spoken to. This had been different. When I went home at the end of my shift, I really hoped I would leave that message behind. It was just a weird occurrence, and I was too tired after work and school to give it much thought. I fell into bed with the marching tune still buzzing around my head, assuming it would fizzle on its own. I should have known better, but a man can hope. I dreamed those words again and again that night. By the time I woke up the next morning, I thought I might be a little mad myself. I had an email from my boss when I got to work that night. He thanked me for transferring the message from F4 the night before, but reminded me that I was to transfer such messages right away. He said that there was 10 seconds of the call that couldn't be accounted for, and wanted a report on what I had heard before I transferred it. Again, I would like to remind you that all transmissions from that particular dimension are to be sent directly upstairs in the future. Your continued assistance in this matter is appreciated. I felt adequately chastised, but tried not to let it bring me down. I got back to work, sending messages into the void and never getting an answer. I tried not to think about it, but it was hard not to remember the way the message had sounded. It had been human, of that I was certain, but it sounded hopeless was the best I could come up with. The voice sounded beaten down, devoid of any real emotion at all, and I wondered what kind of conditions could breed a voice like that. Also, who would have called us just to leave a cryptic message like that? It was a mystery, to be sure, and the more I thought about it, the more curious I became. After that first call, I received a call nightly from the strange poem reader. I always sent them up immediately after that, but it was hard not to hear the beginning of that cadence and get a sense of dread all over again. I got curious about the poem, too. I knew I had heard it somewhere, but I couldn't place it. It sounded military in origin, but I'd never been in the military, and I only knew a couple of people who had. The people I asked just shook their heads and said it sounded familiar, but they also couldn't place it. I started dreaming about it after that first night, and it was affecting the way I slept. It also made me wonder more about F4 and why they would feel so inclined to send out a warning or a message or whatever it was. I decided to do a little bit of snooping, just enough to satiate my appetite. My boss hadn't left, he had just been promoted, so I felt like he might be able to give me some information, if correctly plied. We'll call him Mark for the sake of the story. Mark and I hung out every now and again. We ran in similar circles, after all. And when I invited him out for drinks one evening, it didn't seem that weird. Mark was leading a different department now, and we didn't see as much of each other as we used to around the office. Eventually, the conversation turned towards my discovery. I was glad he had steered it in that direction. It would have looked bad if I'd done it myself. It wouldn't have felt like I was doing something right. It would have felt like I was leading him into a trap. "It's not every day that you make first contact," he said jokingly. "True," I said as I took a sip of Dutch courage, "but I'd give a week's pay to know what they've been talking about with the supervisors. I think about it sometimes, you know, the voice of the man on the other end, and I wonder what they're like." My old boss snorted as he took another drink. "Well, I can assure you, you're not missing out on much." "Oh? Have they said anything interesting?" Mark looked around as if he were worried that he might be under surveillance. And when he continued, he put his face very close to mine, as if sharing some great secret. "Whoever it is on the other side of that machine, they're very interested in us. They don't talk about themselves much. They're mostly interested in our technology. The thing they talk about..." He looked around again before going on. "Some of those things are quite astounding. Interested in us? Why would they be interested in us? We're the ones who need help escaping our planet. How much could we give them?" "Well, I'll tell you, but you gotta keep it to yourself. This is pretty hush-hush stuff. I don't think they'd like it if they knew I was talking to you about it, but you're the one that found them, so maybe they'd understand." He took another conspiratorial look around, and when he was certain that we weren't being eavesdropped on, he went on. "They seem to be interested in our military. Most of their questions have been about the state of our weapons. They want to know what we're capable of and whether we can help them enhance their own technology when it comes to warfare." I wanted to tell him that didn't make any sense, but in a way, I suppose it did. Hadn't I thought that the voice on the other end sounded like it was going to start selling me war bonds? All my mental analogies had pointed back to the World War II propaganda videos. So perhaps we had stumbled across a civilization that was at war with something they couldn't handle. I remembered again what they had called themselves, the Eden Coalition, and wondered what they could be fighting if everyone had decided to band together. What terrible thing could be in store for us if such enemies came to Earth? Have they offered to share anything with us? Oh, yes. They want to show us how to use the device to bring people to the other dimension. That sent my neck hair up. Really? Absolutely. They want to meet us and see what can be brought across from our world to theirs. He didn't bring it up again after that, and I suspect that he realized he'd said too much. We talked a little bit more, but he seemed distant for most of the conversation. The look on his face made me think that he might be contemplating whether what he told me was too much, and maybe what his bosses would make of it if they found out. The next day there was an email about not sharing sensitive information with those who didn't have the proper clearance. My old boss was never heard from again after that. Nothing was ever said to me, but the message was clear. The phone calls continued every night at 9:30 p.m., but now I just transferred them right away. The phrase, boots, 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 was all I ever caught before I sent it to the higher-ups. Starting to go a little crazy myself as the repetition burrowed into my subconscious. I'd find myself repeating it sometimes over and over again as I worked, but I was always careful not to let anyone hear me. They'd ghosted my old boss over loose talk. If they knew that I'd heard and was now repeating it to myself, then what would they do to me? Then one night, something different happened. It had been about a month since Mark had disappeared, and the buzz was that something big was happening. The guys upstairs had been working on something hush-hush, but the more secret the project, the more likely the bleed-out is. They had been up to look at the machine I was using to send messages, but they didn't say much. All I'd caught was a question that had been shushed quickly. A question about sending living things through the portal. Living things. They couldn't possibly be planning something like that. Could they? That night, same as the night before, the phone rang for F4. I picked it up, meaning to transfer it, but when the voice didn't immediately start yelling about boots, I stopped. It was a long pause, a sound like a breath being drawn in. And as I started to say hello, I heard a loud bang on the other end as someone began to shout. It was loud, making me pull my ear away from the phone, and as they began to yell out more of the chant, I nearly dropped it on the floor. Try to think of something different. Oh my God, keep me from going lunatic. Boots, 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 moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the... It was cut off abruptly after that. It was replaced by a loud static sound before one of those English, not English voices said hello from the other end. I was silent, trying not to move or speak, and that seemed to make the voice even angrier. Hello? Hello? Who is this? Who do you work for? We will find you. No one gets away with spying on the Eden... But I hung up on him then. I didn't send any more messages after that. I just grabbed my bag and left early. I was officially done with the night, and I didn't care what they thought about it. I was sure that they would pull me over with every mile I rolled, but when I pulled up at my house without being grabbed by people in a white van, I thought I might have gotten away scot-free. I tried to sleep, but the words of the marching chant ran through my head over and over again. Boots, 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 boots. What did it mean? Moving up and down again. Why did they keep sending it? Men go mad from watching them. What were they trying to tell me? If your eyes drop put my head under my pillow, but it was almost like I could hear the sound of them marching in my ears. They will get atop of you. I looked at my phone when it started to ring, peeking at it as it buzzed ominously. Try. There's only one person that could be calling me this late at night to think of something different. They'd found me missing and were looking for me. Worse, they knew I'd listened to the phone call. What would they do to me? This was a government contract. I could be arrested for treason, sent to Leavenworth, or just vanished like my old boss. They had my address. They could just come get me. Oh my God, keep. I reached for the phone with shaky hands, knowing it wouldn't make any difference, whether I picked it up or not. Me from going lunatic. Hello, I said, wetting my lips. Mr. Starn, it's Medici Labs. We need you to come back to the facility. Something's come up, and we need to speak with you urgently. Boots. I shook my head, trying to squash the chant. Very well, let me get dressed, and I'll be on my way, and there's a car waiting outside for you. It's a black town car. It'll be parked on the curve. Please hurry, Mr. Starn. Dr. Klein is very interested to speak with you. I hung up the phone, shaking a little as I got dressed. I'm writing this down before they take me. I don't know if I'll ever come back again, but I know I can't listen to that voice chant about boots anymore. Whatever's going on in that universe, whatever the Eden Coalition is doing, it isn't good. I pray I come back from this, but I fear I might find out firsthand what those marching boots look like. Perhaps that's where they've been sending the people they disappear. Perhaps I'll find out for myself what it's like in F-04. Madge, these paintings are stupendous. How do you do it? We were standing in Marjorie's home studio, looking over her latest art piece. Madge and I had met in college, and she was an accomplished artist even then. She'd come a long way from opening the tiny student center auditorium at our college, and now she had her own gallery in the village, where most of her artwork was displayed. I'd always loved her eye for detail, but this was better than anything I'd ever seen. This was next level, so beyond anything, and I was just astonished at how far my friend had come. Madge laughed, swirling her wine as she looked lovingly at her latest piece. It really is. I've had offers already, and it hasn't even been shown anywhere besides my little spot in the village. I wish I could get this level of detail in my writing. Oh, come on, your writing is amazing. Every story is so immersive, it's like my own little movie. I guess, but I can't seem to get any of those details from my last work. I just can't seem to get past this middle part. It's been giving me fits. Well, Madge said, giving me a coy look, maybe you need to use my latest find. Latest find? I asked, not sure what she was talking about. What have you found now? Madge was always trying out new ways to focus and inspire her work. In the time I had known her, Madge had tried dozens of diets, different workout routines, and mental stimulation techniques, meditation rituals, and all manner of other things. It was admirable. Madge really believed in her work, but it seemed she was always on her latest find. She took me down a hallway and opened a door onto a white room with a large black pod sitting in it. What is that? I asked, intrigued. It's called the egg. It was aptly named. It looked a bit like an egg. It was an egg-shaped metal bed that was fully enclosed and set on a small raised platform. It was the only thing in the room and dominated it completely. I could see a hatch that would open up the top of the egg so that someone could get in, and I wondered what was in that strange container. Water, maybe, or perhaps just a comfortable place to meditate. "It's a sensory deprivation tank," Madge said, "and it's supposed to cut you off from outside stimuli so that you can tap into the most primal part of your inner mind." "Does it work?" "Well, you saw the paintings. You tell me." I put a hand on the outside of the pod and felt how smooth it was. It was metallic smooth, like the smoothness of a dolphin's skin. It was oily and a little slippery, and I wondered how she climbed into this thing without falling down on her ass. I was also intrigued. If this thing could take her work to the level that I'd seen it, then what could it do for me? "Do you want to try it?" Madge asked. "Could I?" She laughed. "Well, of course, silly. I wouldn't have brought you here if I didn't intend to let you try it out." I ran my hand along it again. Did I really want to climb inside the strange metal cocoon? I had to admit that even looking at it was giving me ideas. Just being around it, I felt like I could see where I was going wrong a few chapters in. If I could change those chapters, then the book might progress smoothly, and I could get back to work. That made me wonder what revelations I could discover by climbing inside. I nodded, and Madge unhooked a pair of clasps and tipped the dome up. There were little grooves carved into the side of it, the side that I hadn't seen, and I stepped up and looked into the egg. There was nothing but a cushy seat inside, and as I sat down, I felt incredibly comfortable. The chair was one of those backside devouring numbers, the ones that are like sitting on a cloud. "I'll set the timer for about 30 minutes, Madge said. "But if you feel like you're getting claustrophobic, just bang on the side. I won't go far." I nodded, honestly unsure what to expect, and as the top of the egg came down, it was suddenly cut off from everything. Many of you have probably never experienced true silence. I'm here to tell you that it's pretty weird. There were no lights inside the egg. No sound got in through the cracks. I knew I was inside, but as I reached out to touch it, I couldn't even feel it. We take feeling things with our fingers for granted, but touching the inside of this was like touching nothing. I tried to control my breathing, but it really was feeling a little claustrophobic. I sat back, though, trying to get comfortable as the oppressive darkness crept in on me. It reminded me of the darkness I found in my room when I was a little girl. The door closed, the shadows moving as my imagination ran wild. I blinked, my eyes hungry for light of any kind, and as I did, I became aware that the inside was lighting up. Not a lot. It wasn't one of those let there be light kind of things, but the darkness softened some. It reminded me of the purple darkness that you sometimes see in shows with space travel. I was moving, too, moving forward as if on a rail, and I could see something coming up before me. It was small, a blip on the horizon, but as I got closer, it started to grow. I was traveling at a relative speed, like I was riding in a car or something. And when the outside came into focus, I realized I was looking at a massive door. The door was... I don't know how to describe it, honestly. Eldritch, timeless, elven maybe. Whatever it was, it looked like it had just arrived in space in the early days of anything and set up shop. There were these things etched into the frame, words or symbols that I couldn't understand, and on the front was a word that I could. It was in big letters, the kind that belong in a kid's picture book. The big block letters spelled out inspiration, and I supposed it would have inspired me to write something. I had come to rest at the edge of the little mound of earth it sat upon, and I was surprised to find that I could stand up and walk towards it. It was easily 30 feet high, half again as wide, and the closer I got, the louder the whispers became. I could hear something whispering, the pervasive kind of whispering that you hear in horror movies, and it was coming from the cracks in that massive door. I put my ear to it and began to listen, and it told me a story I had never heard before. I'd already discovered how to get over the hump that was holding me up, but the door gave me a new story as well. It was a better tale than the one I had so diligently worked on, and I felt foolish for ever starting it. This story was a bestseller. A bestseller, if ever there was one. I drank it in like manna, wanting to get all of it, but as it told me the secrets of my next great work, there was suddenly a bright intrusion of light. I felt my eyes screaming and thought that I must surely go blind. The light would cook my brain right out of my head, and I'd die right here beside this huge door. But when someone shook me, I opened my eyes slowly as I realized I was still in the egg. "Are you okay? You said 30 minutes. Did you—" She stopped, clearly seeing something on my face that she didn't like. "Are you okay?" I was looking around frantically, not entirely sure what was happening, but as Madge put a hand on my arm to steady me, I came back to myself. I was in her side room, inside this strange object that she had bought for her art. I had been using it to help me with my book. I'd seen the door. I'd heard the story. "It's wild, isn't it?" Madge said, grinning as she helped me climb out. I nodded, but I didn't think she understood how right she was. It was weird going back to life as I'd known it after seeing that door. It was like the door had been some vaguely remembered other life, or like a video game I had played and lived another life through. It faded over me, but what didn't fade was the story it had given me. I went home and immediately set to work on it. It was amazing, something that I had never known, that I wanted until it had been shown to me. I sequestered myself for weeks, furiously writing until I had it all down. But that was when the trouble started. Reading over it, making changes, making edits, I started to see that what I had wasn't right. This wasn't the beautiful story that the door had sung into me. I'd butchered it. This was a chop job, but it was the best I could do. As I went through it, I knew this wouldn't cut it. I needed to do better. The story had actually begun to fade a little in my mind, and I knew that if I wanted this second draft to be as good as it could be, as good as the one the door had whispered to me, I would need to hear it again. Madge laughed when I called her and asked if I could use the egg. "Got a little touch of the old writer's block, do you? That's okay, the egg will fix you up. Come on over tonight. I'll take care of you." She sounded a little funny on the phone, but I didn't realize that at the moment. Her laughter went a little too high, her voice was a little too shrill, and her mood was a little too jolly. She sounded drunk, but that wasn't outside the norm for her. I figured she was celebrating a big piece or a gallery showing, and headed over to her place. When she opened the door and welcomed me in, I was, again, pretty sure that she was drunk. She looked rough. Her hair was greasy and unwashed, hanging about her head like a stringy curtain. She wasn't wearing makeup. She had traded her usual sweaters and capri pants for sweats and a baggy t-shirt. She was thinner than I remembered, and I wondered if she'd been eating regularly. If I hadn't been half out of my mind already, I probably would have been more worried. I didn't have time to worry. I needed my story. "Glad you're here. You can take a look at the stuff I've been working on." Madge had always been a prolific artist, but now The walls of her living room and dining room were full of new art that she had created. The canvases, well, they were something. Madge's art had always been soft, maybe even a little naive, but this new stuff was like cave paintings. They were charcoal and dark smears of what might have been feces. They were like the magic pictures I had seen in books as a kid. The pictures were shapes and odd formations, but once you saw it, it was impossible not to see. "They're so good," she said, the sound of her lighter very loud as she lit a cigarette. "These are so different from anything I've ever done." "Have you got a buyer yet?" I asked, a little awestruck. "I bet you could sell these for a—" "Sell them?" Madge sounded scandalized. "These are my babies. Oh, no. These are gifts from my muse, from the egg." "From the door?" I asked, and Madge looked at me like she had never seen me before. "You've seen it too," she whispered. She sounded like she was afraid to wake it up. It gave me my new story. That's why I'm here, Madge. I need to see it again. I need this second draft to be amazing. I need it to be perfect." "Are you going to give it to your editor?" I started to say that of course I would, but I couldn't. Why hadn't I given my first draft to my editor yet? I was so worried about this book being perfect, but now I was curious why I hadn't shared it with my editor. Why hadn't I shared it with Madge, for that matter? I'd always shared things with her, but it had never even occurred to me with this one. That should have been a second tip-off, but like I said, I was hungry for my story. "I need to use the egg," I said, and she nodded as she took me to the little room. It was different now. It had been pristine before, but now the floor was littered with refuse. Chip bags, soda cans, the leavings of old meals, all the trappings of a life lived behind the door, or inside the egg. "Sorry," she said sheepishly. "I should have cleaned up a little. I knew you were coming, but I just... It's fine," I said, putting her mind at ease. "I came over spur of the moment." She opened the egg, and I was hit with the smell of old sweat and unwashed skin. I had to wonder if Madge had been living in this thing, and as I climbed in, I had to hold my breath as the smell wafted over me. It was intense, but that was the price of doing business. If I wanted the book, then I would have to pay the toll. "How long do you want?" she asked, and she sounded hesitant to close the bubble. She sounded like she might like very much to climb in with me. "Give me an hour," I said, and Madge nodded as she closed the shell behind me. As the shell closed, the smell encased me. It didn't last long. It was soon enveloped in that all-encompassing silence as I drifted away. I opened my eyes to find that I was once more floating through the darkness, flying towards the door again. I was moving closer, the door rising before me. It was as huge as I remembered it, and the runes still marking the outside. As I approached the crack between the door and the jamb, I started hearing the whispers again. I listened, I refreshed myself, and I heard what I had forgotten. I knew how to make it great. I knew how it could be completed. I listened again and again, like a child hearing their favorite bedtime story. But over time, the story began to change. It changed, and it expanded. The door told me many stories, so many that my mind began to spin. It was too much. I shouldn't have done more than 30 minutes. The stories were too much. I was getting too much. My head was going to explode. Madge was going to have to clean me out of this thing when I was done, popping like a grape. I could feel the veins thrumming on the side of my head, and I just knew that any minute, any second, I was going to... The light, the all-enveloping light, was suddenly filling my eyes when Madge opened the egg. I threw my arms around her and hugged her tightly. "Thank you. God, thank you." Madge didn't hug me back. Instead, she started trying to push me out of the egg. I was a little bigger than her, so it was hard to manage, but as I got the hint and climbed out, Madge climbed in and grabbed the edge of the shell. "I need to be back in," she mumbled before the lid slammed shut. "You've been in there long enough. It's my turn." She pulled it shut behind her, and it was the last time I ever saw her. I tried to get the lid up, wanted to warn her, but there must have been some kind of latch on the inside or something. I couldn't get it open, and I couldn't get her to come out, so finally I just went home to finish my book. It's perfect now. There's no gaps or problems with it. It's as good as I can make it, and that is as close to perfect as it'll ever be. Madge still hasn't called me. I don't think she ever will. I'm looking at the finished manuscript, but I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Every time I think about sending it to my editor, I get this overwhelming feeling of anxiety that I just can't do it. Maybe someday when the constant ring round the rosy of stories stops spinning around my brain. But not today. I'm afraid of the egg, afraid of what it could do to me, but I'm also tempted to go purchase my own. I suppose then Madge and I can have matching coffins when they find us dead within the egg. Okay, Shelley, what brings you in today? Shelley Jane, a longtime patient of Dr. Winter's, usually came in for things like nervous anxiety or paranoia. In reality, it was the threads of the trauma her stepfather had left behind. Dr. Winters had been pruning them for years, and it seemed there was always one more to pare back. Winter assumed this would be just another one of these sessions, but she couldn't have been more wrong. Well, it was strange. I had an incident yesterday with my son. It was something I couldn't explain, and it made me think of my stepfather again, which nearly gave me an anxiety attack. Winter nodded, taking a seat as she tapped her pen on the page. "That's unfortunate, Shelley. Is Michael okay?" "Oh, yes, he's fine. He's a little afraid, but he's physically fine." Pamela furrowed her brow, making some notes as she thought about how to answer that. "Why don't you tell me what happened, and I'll see if I can help you make sense of it." Shelley nodded, looking at the ceiling as her face became slack. "Well, I was at the sink, doing dishes, and I asked him to take the garbage out. He said he was busy with something, Legos or a puzzle maybe, and before I knew what I was doing, I said something strange." "Strange?" Winter asked. "Strange how?" "I told him he better get that garbage out before Mr. Danver came to get him. And then I got the most profound feeling of vertigo and anxiety I have ever had." Winter looked up from her pad, not understanding. "Do you know a Mr. Danvers?" "No, I don't know anybody by that name. It was weird, Doc. I just stood there as we looked at each other and hoped he wouldn't ask me about Mr. Danvers. If he didn't ask me, then I wouldn't have to talk about him. And I didn't want to talk about him. Mr. Danvers made me think of..." Her face went blank for a moment before she shook it off. "Think of someone in my childhood. Someone who told me about Mr. Danvers when I was very small." That would be the stepdad, Winter figured, and if she couldn't remember him, then the pruning was starting to work. "Michael asked who Mr. Danvers was, and She paused, trying to find some way to explain it before saying, "I sang him a song." Winter looked up from her notebook. "A song?" "Yes, but I can't remember all of it now." "Do you remember any of it?" Shelley tried to remember, scrunching her face up like she might be in pain. And then something deeper than the state Winter sometimes put her patients in spread over her. Winter felt a cold chill work through her. This was different than anything she had ever seen, like possession, and when Shelley started speaking, Winter felt an undeniable pull of magic. He comes for bad kids, naughty kids, and kids that don't listen. He finds where they hide, and they go missing. When Mr. Danver comes to town, you better beware. When Mr. Danver comes to town, you better be scared. He's tall and old, with skin so thin. His hair is wisps, gray as tin. His teeth are sharp, his eyes are black. He'll drag you off, and you'll never come back. When Mr. Danver comes to town, you better beware. When Mr. Danver comes to town, you better be scared. Winter had shared the deepest pits of hell with demons that would make mortal skin crawl, but this was something completely different. Shelley hadn't even sounded like herself when she sang. Her voice had been deeper, like a hollow well, and the accent had been different from her normal southern drawl. Whoever had taught her this little rhyme had not done so out of a sense of legacy or love. This was a dark element, something kept alive through the span of generations by knowledge of it, and Winter doubted it was something told casually to a kiddo before bedtime. When she finished, Shelley blinked and looked around. "Oh, what happened? I feel like I passed out for a moment." "Nothing," Winter lied. "What happened after you told Michael about Mr. Danver?" "He was terrified. I shook myself, and he was crying. I comforted him, telling him how sorry I was for scaring him. I hadn't remembered Mr. Danver for years and years, and I would have never told Michael about him. Scaring children like that is something I would never condone." Winter had set the notepad down and was slowly stalking towards the couch. "Then what happened?" "Well, we went back to what we'd been doing. But then that night he woke up and he started screaming. He said there was a man in his room, an old man with long arms and legs and big sharp smile. It terrified him, and I just held him and cried with him." Winter slowly let her hands creep into Shelley's hair as she searched for the next memory to prune. He was there, Mr. Danver, and she could see Shelley's stepfather as he told her about him, grinning as he sang the song. He was gleeful about scaring her, and he used Mr. Danver's shadow to do all kinds of terrible things that Winter had been helping her forget for years. She yanked, trying to tear the terrible memory out, but it was like a weed. The roots were deep, and they stubbornly held on. Shelley was shaking and moaning as she worked to free her, and when the memory of Mr. Danver finally came out, she screamed like a banshee. She lay back, panting heavily, as the pain in her head receded. When she was finally still, Winter let her rest as she went to the waiting room and looked for her son. He was sitting there, reading a highlights magazine from last decade, and she invited him to the back as well, so she could scrub the memories of that dark creature. Half an hour later, both of them were thanking her and walking out of the clinic. Winter waved, hoping the memories of the creature would be all that tied them to her. "Juliet, what is our afternoon looking like?" "Well, we got 5 more patients, 2 adults and 3 children, and it seems they're all having nightmares." Winter furrowed her brow. "What are the odds that this has something to do with Mr. Danver?" "Who?" Juliet asked. Winter shook her head. "Never mind." She headed to room number 2, where her next client was waiting. It appeared she had quite a workload this afternoon. And then Mom sang a little song about this Mr. Danver. It was creepy. I didn't like it, and it made me feel weird. It was like there was a worm in my brain, and it was wriggling in deeper by the moment. Then that night, the poor girl shuddered. Dr. Winter's fingers were deep in her mind. Mr. Danver came to my room and told me I better be good, or else he would come and get me. And have you been? Winter asked, her fingers pausing. I was always good, but I've been afraid to do much of anything since... She shuddered as Winter took hold of the root and drug it out. The girl, Dianne Breedley, gasped fitfully for a moment, but then, as the memories came loose, she settled back onto the couch. Dr. Pamela Winter sighed deeply. This was the 8th one this week, and Winter wasn't sure it would ever end. Children and adults alike seemed to be plagued with memories of this Mr. Danver. Winter had been wiping these memories as quickly as she could, but it didn't seem to be doing any good. The day before, Michael and his mother had come back and told her that Mr. Danver had come back to see Michael after an argument. The thing had tried to take him, but Shelley had forgiven him and Mr. Danver had left. The memories had come flooding back again after the argument, and this time they were even harder to pluck out. I didn't even remember him until Michael yelled, but once he had acted out, it all came back. It hurt, she whispered. It was like eels in my brain. I don't understand, Winter thought to herself after the last patient had gone home. He shouldn't be able to come back. If the memories are gone, then how can they even be afraid of him? Memories didn't work like that, not really. They could come back, but it usually took time. Memories were funny like that, and they had deep roots. They often grew back if you didn't go deep enough, but it always took a while. For them to just spontaneously emerge like that made this a particularly devious bit of magic, or whatever it was. Winter didn't like this. It was like an epidemic of some sorts. She wondered how to get rid of this Mr. Danver and his antics, but the answer actually found her first. She was getting ready to go to bed, packing up so that she could head home when a phone call came in. It was Shelley again, and she and Michael had a problem. Michael broke some dishes when he was washing them, and when I heard him swear, the memories of Mr. Danver came back all over again. Now I fear it'll be coming for Michael. Can you please come over here? Maybe there's something you can do. Have you forgiven him? Winter asked, already running as she headed for the house that Shelley had not far from Main Street. If I do, then Mr. Danver will just go away. Then we'll have to deal with him again after that. You've done so much, Dr. Winter, and maybe you can help us get rid of him. Dr. Winter was coming up the road, the dark cloyingly close around her. The streets were barren, not too uncommon for this time of the evening in a small town like Kashmir, and Winter didn't mind putting on steam since no one was there to see. I'll be there in 5 minutes, she promised, but Shelley didn't hear her. Winter could hear from the other end of the phone that someone was yelling, and the odd sound of scrabbling claws made it pretty clear that Mr. Danver had arrived. Dr. Winter came to the front of 546 Morrison Street and found the front door open. She came in through the door, but before she could give herself away, she saw the mayhem in the living room. Armchairs were turned over, a lamp lay broken, and as her eyes tracked to the stairwell, she could see the marks of nails that had gouged their way into the wood. Upstairs, she could hear banging and shouting, with an underlay of crying and begging. She came slowly up the stairs, careful not to make a sound. She wanted to come across this Mr. Danver before he knew she was there. Demons were always put off their guard when snuck up on. She came to the top of the stairs and found him battering at the door to one of the bedrooms. Behind the door, Shelley and Michael were screaming and begging it to go away, and Mr. Danver was promising 1,000 different punishments if they didn't open up. He would flay them, he would eat them alive, he would break their bones and grind their teeth down, he would wear their skin and eat their fingers, but he stopped as he sensed Dr. Winter. He turned, and Winter set her feet to stop herself from shuddering. He was a burnt corpse, a bloated creature with bulging skin of necrotized flesh. His arms and legs were stretched like taffy as they slipped from the arms of a suit he wore. The bowler hat on his bald head nearly blended in, and his burning red eyes seemed to jump out of his head. The shiver in her spine was gone, though. This was a demon who had come into her territory, uninvited, and it was about to learn a very valuable lesson about boundaries. "You must be this Dr. Winters I've heard so much about," he said, dragging his body across the carpet like an oversized bug. "I am," Dr. Winters said, squaring her shoulders as it rose before her. He laughed, getting closer and closer as his nails dug into the shag flooring. "I must say, for the whispers I've heard about you, I'd expected more. I gave that crafty old devil in the prison a wide berth, and I didn't let the guardian in the woods catch my scent neither. But the town was such a tasty treat that I couldn't resist. I see now that I had no reason to worry. You're just a weak little—" But he stopped talking as the hand he had been reaching for her with suddenly detached from its wrist. Mr. Danver popped back, but not fast enough. Winter caught him by the face and pulled him close, his skin splitting as she squeezed. He cried out, sounding as afraid as the two behind the door, but Dr. Winter would send her message before she sent this thing back where it came from. He would talk to others who might want to come and take her territory, and she wanted to make it very clear that this would not be tolerated. "I could kill you now, put you down like the dog you are, but a lesson in manners will serve you better. Kashmir is my town, mine, and you and all your grubby little friends will stay away from it. Do you understand me?" Before he could answer, she grabbed his stumped arm and tore it off. Mr. Danvers screamed in pain, something he hadn't felt in millennia, she had no doubt. "Do I make myself clear?" she yelled at him. Yeah, please, just let me go. I'll never come back here again." Dr. Winters let go of his face and pushed him back. "If I so much as hear your name in someone's memories, I will hunt you down, no matter where you are." Mr. Danver sank into a shadowy mound as his aura dissipated from the house. Winter knocked on the bedroom door and told them it was safe to come out. Shelley and Michael peeked out, not quite sure if she was a trick of some kind, but when they found Dr. Winters smiling at them from the hallway, they came out and hugged her in relief. "Thank you, Dr. Winter. How did you get rid of that terrible creature?" Dr. Winters rested a hand on either side of their heads, sinking her fingers in as easily as if their skulls were clay. "What creature? I came to help mediate an argument between the two of you. It was quite a bad one, but I got the two of you to see reason. I don't think you'll have any more problems. Do you?" They went from hugging her to hugging each other as they cried, saying they would never fight again. Dr. Winter left, heading home after a long day. She doubted this would be the last poacher she had to deal with, but she hoped the rest would be less spine-tingling than Mr. Danvers. "So I hear you have a special gift." The man had met Mr. Seraph in the park, and the son didn't agree with the old devil. He had no qualms about the daylight. It did not burn him or discomfort him. It was just that his kind had always done their business in the dark, and he was a creature of habit. This place, with the sounds of happy people and the noise of children and old folks, was too saccharine for him. "I do," said the man, as he pushed his fingers together again and again in a vaguely mystic formation. Man hell, this was more boy than man. The kid couldn't be more than 17, and Mr. Seraph did not, as a habit, make deals with children. He didn't have anything against it. It's just that they could be slippery if they needed to be, and the law often protected them from deals, predatory or otherwise. So above, so below wasn't just a catchy slogan, and it made dealing with children a little prickly sometimes. "How old are you, boy?" Mr. Seraph asked. 25, the kid answered. It was too quick. A lie. "Try again and tell the truth, or I'll be on my way." The kid breathed in a deep sigh. 18, I swear, which probably meant 16 or 17 in reality. "Very well. And why would you want to sell your talent when it's likely just burgeoning?" As if in answer, the kid took out a knife, and before Mr. Seraph could stop him, he had cut himself a good one along the meat of his arm. It bled, dribbling a little as he set the knife aside and touched it with the hand that had been holding the knife. There was a flash of light, a smell of ozone, and when Mr. Seraph could see again, he saw that the wound was healed. There was no scar, no blemish, and it was like it had never happened. "Well, now, that is something." "Sure, I guess," the boy said. "It helped me a lot, but it's ultimately useless." Mr. Seraph raised an eyebrow, smelling a double cross. "And why is that?" "It can't cure the one person I want to cure. She says that if God wants her to be healed, then she will be healed. If she doesn't get the operation she needs to heal what I can't, then she'll die. If she dies, then I see no reason to live." Mr. Seraph had to stop himself from rolling his eyes. Youths, like this one, made a great deal about love. Who was to say that this girl wouldn't just leave him in a day, a year, 10 years even? She might die anyway. She might wake up with no memories of him. Who knew what lay in the future, but his gift could be worth millions. "I have to ask," Mr. Seraph said, "why would you trade this gift for her?" The boy shrugged. "Because she is my gift. She's the love of my life, and I love her more than life itself. If she wasn't here, the gift would die anyway. There's no life for me without her. I suppose that is as good a reason as any. I can offer," but the boy held out a piece of paper. Mr. Seraph furrowed his brow as he took it, opening it to see that the boy had an offer of his own. "That's how much I need. I don't need anything else. I may not be able to heal her with my powers, but I'll heal her." Mr. Seraph chuckled a little. "This is acceptable. Come with me. It sounds as if you don't have a lot of time." The boy followed, and whether he was damned for it or not was up to interpretation. "Sounds like the kid really had it planned out," Lucifer said, as Mr. Seraph sat down, looking at the little book that held the talent. It had taken the form of something simple, like an old Bible or a journal, and it sat on the corner of the desk like a hunkered beast. Mr. Seraph always felt a little strange when he found a talent like this one. He had taken many talents in his time on Earth, but it was always those that were close to the divine that made him feel uncomfortable. If there was a God, and Mr. Seraph knew there was, then how could he allow a creature like him to own this? Indeed, Mr. Seraph said, stroking the cover absent-mindedly. Who do you sell something like that to, anyway? Lucifer asked. A doctor or something? Mr. Seraph laughed. A doctor? You have me sell an honest-to-God miracle to a doctor? My dear boy, A, most of them couldn't afford what we offer, and B, they wouldn't believe it if it was offered. Well, who then? Lucifer asked, smiling as he leaned forward in expectation of a show. Mr. Seraph reached for his Rolodex, spinning through the cards as he tried to find just the right section. The only group on the planet with the right combination of belief and cash. He grinned as he found what he was looking for and took 3 cards out to lay them next to the phone. Lucifer often spoke about the ease of using his cell phone for such things, but Mr. Seraph liked to keep things analog. Lucifer moved up behind him, and when he saw the contact cards, he couldn't help but laugh. You can't be serious, he said. Where else would you sell a healing power? Who else would believe and want such a thing but a pastor of a large flock with deep pockets? Mr. Seraph tried to look at ease as he sat in the ostentatious office of Pastor Mark Gideon. He was never sure why he felt so uncomfortable walking into these places. This man, in a pressed suit and a $500 haircut, was more interested in money than glory at this point, and Mr. Seraph had less to fear from him than most of the fire and brimstone preachers. It took conviction to send his kind back to the pit, not a jet and a summer home in Brazil. Besides, Mr. Seraph reflected, he had been invited in. Mr. Seraph, Mark said, the name coming out like Mista in his thick southern accent. It is so good to see you again. I had hoped you would find another dose of oration for my upcoming jubilee. The man practically oozed 1%. His skin had that healthy glow you often saw from sun collected from a different hemisphere. His hair was thin, but it had been teased into a gray perm that threatened to show the skull beneath. He favored gray suits, a different American flag pin for each, and his small, soft hands had a ring for each finger. The crucifix he wore was the least audacious thing about him, and that should have told most people all they needed to know. Oh, no, Pastor Gideon, I have something much more impressive. I have brought you a true miracle. The man's eyes glittered as he pulled the leather-bound book from his coat. You always bring me such gifts. This one is no exception, Mr. Seraph said. This is the kind of power that you've only read about, the kind that could forge a dynasty for a man such as yourself. This isn't just faith healing, it's actual healing. Mark's eyes grew wide. Truly, it's the real McCoy. He reached for the book with trembling fingers, and he looked crestfallen when Mr. Seraph slid it out of his reach. The real Old Testament magic. But the price tag is not cheap. Mark Gideon wet his lips and reached into his coat for his wallet. Whatever it costs, I will pay it. Name your price, sir. Keep in mind, Mr. Seraph said, this will not last forever. Even miracles have their limits. Quit your stalling and give me a price, Gideon snapped, as he dabbed his brow with a napkin. Mr. Seraph smiled and wrote it on a paper before passing it to the powdered little shyster. Pastor Gideon looked at it, sighed, and nodded as he took out his checkbook. By the way, Mr. Seraph added. "If you're looking for a test case, I have a suggestion." He slid another piece of paper across the desk, and Mark Gideon opened it as he finished writing the check. "And if it doesn't work, then you can be sure that this check will be canceled." Mr. Seraph smiled. "Trust me, my friend. It'll work better than your wildest dreams." It was a very lucrative day for Libris talent. In local news, a girl was cured miraculously of her stage 3 cancer. Emily Gray and her parents, accompanied by her boyfriend, who was attempting to pay for an experimental surgery to save her life, were seen with megachurch pastor Mark Gideon as he talked to Channel 7 about how this all came to be. The press conference had sprawled across the front lawn of Sisters of Mercy Hospital as Mark Gideon and the happy family smiled for photos. The boy looked more like the young man he should have been, and less like the haggard corpse that Mr. Seraph had met with. Letting him keep the money and have his beloved was an added bonus. The kid had been genuine, and Mr. Seraph found that more than a little endearing. "I was sitting at my desk at Salvation Ministries a few nights ago, studying the Word and preparing for my sermon, when the Lord spoke to me and said, 'Mark, I need you for a special job. This girl has a purpose. Her work here is not yet done, and I need you to be my messenger. Go to her and heal her and make her whole again.' When the Lord gives you a message like that, you follow it. He has blessed me with the gift of healing, and I mean to be about his work." The newscaster came back then, the last image, one of the girl talking excitedly to the boy on her left. It was a better image to end on than the powdered and prissy face of Mark Gideon. Pastor Gideon went back into the hospital and cured 7 more patients on the cancer floor, as well as several others in the ER. It's hard to argue with the facts, and it appears that we have an honest-to-God miracle amongst us. Mr. Seraph shook his head, picking up his phone and calling Gideon. The pastor picked up on the 3rd ring. "There he is, God's answer to my prayers. What can I do for you, Mr. Seraph?" "I just wanted to thank you for healing the girl. She's a friend of a friend. I trust you're making good use of the talent." "I am, sir, I am. I have arrangements to perform live miracles tonight on stage at my nightly sermon. We would love to have you in attendance, if you will come." "Afraid I have pressing matters." "Do be cautious, though, Gideon. That talent won't last forever." Pastor Gideon laughed. "One does not squander the good works of God, my friend," and hung up. Mr. Seraph shook his head. He had never doubted that Gideon would squander it, but it would really come down to the quickness of that squandering in the end. And Salvation Ministry was on the scene at the site of the crisis as Pastor Mark Gideon prayed over and laid hands on the wounded. Emergency staff were said to have reported that the wounded were miraculously healed of their wounds. This is not the first time we have seen Pastor Gideon come to a place of peril and help them through prayers and miracles. "I can't believe you sold a genuine miracle to that man," Lucifer said, shaking his head as he watched the newscast. It had been about 3 months since the sale, and the Salvation Ministries had been making use of it in the media. Pastor Mark Gideon had been seen at children's hospitals, at the site of disasters, and on the stage of his own megachurch performing miracles. He was seen healing the sick, helping the wounded, and curing the seemingly incurable. Numbers at the church had been on the rise, and Mr. Seraph couldn't blame Pastor Gideon for burying his talent, it seemed. "I can't think of anyone else to sell it to, honestly. He could put it to the most use, and the fall afterward will be just as spectacular." "What do you mean?" Lucifer asked, but as if on cue, the phone suddenly rang, and Mr. Seraph picked it up, smiling as the expected voice came from the headset. Libris, but the voice cut him off. Seraph, it's Mark Gideon. Good afternoon, he said, trying for something conversational and simply sounding sweaty and nervous. I was hoping we could discuss buying a bit more of that, special stuff you have there. Mr. Seraph winked at Lucifer as he kicked his feet up on the desk. Oh, I'm sure I could find some oratory talent for you if you need... No, Gideon said, trying to keep the anger out of his voice. I mean, the other thing. I need more of the, Mr. Seraph heard him close a door and lower his voice. I need more of the miracle talent you sold me. Oh? Mr. Seraph asked. It's only been a few months. Have you run dry already? There was silence for a moment, the sound of heavy breathing, the only backdrop. There has been much suffering as of late, as you must know. I have been going where I'm needed and helping the sick and the poor and making money hand over fist, I'm sure, Mr. Seraph said. More silence. The breather attempting to swallow what must be enough anger to choke a horse. I just need to purchase more, Mr. Seraph. I have no need of your jokes. Sell me more, and I will be on my way. That's unfortunate. I did warn you, Mr. Seraph crooned. I warned you that this power was rare. I have never offered it to you before because this was the first time I have ever had any of it. That was all there was. There was no more. I cautioned you to use it sparingly, to be frugal, but you apparently did not listen. What? He breathed it out, and Mr. Seraph could hear him wetting his lips on the other side of the phone. What do you mean there isn't any more? I'm supposed to heal someone tomorrow. Someone very important. But it stopped working last night when I visited the children's hospital. I only got through a few kids before the miracle light ceased. I thought I might just be tired, but when I couldn't even heal a hangnail on my hand this morning. Mr. Seraph laughed. He couldn't help it. Please tell me that you were not using a gift from God for something so trivial. I just wanted to know if it would work, he said, static bleeding over the phone as he squeezed it. And now you're telling me that it's gone. Mr. Gideon, how often do you have to purchase speaking talent from me? The angry pastor contemplated this for a breath or two. Every few years, maybe every 16 months. Oration is considered a common talent, and it's still quite rare. What I sold you is a once-in-a-lifetime talent. We may never see its like again, and you used it up in less than 6 months. How foolish. But I suppose it was yours to use as you see fit. You can't do this to me. This will ruin me. How dare you? Who do you think you... I would suggest, Mr. Seraph said icily, you not pile on the foolishness today, Mark Gideon. If you wish to see another drop of silver tongue from me, you will hang up now, and I will forget that you spoke to me in such a way. Mr. Seraph's voice had been icy, his good humor suddenly turning frigid. He was aware that this man was embarrassed after all, but he had let that embarrassment push him down an unadvisable path. Now, Gideon must correct this before he brought further ruin on himself by making an enemy of Mr. Seraph and pushing his decline further into ruin.
I will never call upon you again. You are the devil for certain. Mark Gideon hung up, and he had been telling the truth, though he couldn't have known it. He would never call Richard T. Seraph again, though not for the reasons that he probably thought. Oof, tough break, boss. That's a lot of money off the table. Is it? Mr. Seraph said, hanging up the phone before dialing again. I wonder. Lucifer heard the phone buzz 3 times before someone with a deep, resonant voice answered. Mr. Brand, it's Richard T. Seraph. I should think that by the end of the week, Pastor Mark Gideon should be in no position to threaten your growing ministry. His flock will likely be looking for a new church home by the middle of the year. And when that happens, I will expect you to make good on your deal. There was some low talk, the two of them talking about the particulars, and when he hung up, Mr. Seraph was smiling all the wider. Lucifer shook his head. You sly dog. You were banking on him being a greedy little piggy, weren't you? Mr. Seraph spread his arms. Of course. The one safe bet, my dear Mr. Jones, is that there is always someone betting on your demise, and they're willing to pay big bucks for the date and time of your downfall.
Hey, CO. I turned to the glass where someone was banging a fist against the barrier between me and them. I've been working at Stragview for about half a year, one of the latest graduating classes from the academy. I didn't quite have the sand for confinement, and I wasn't really fond of the rough and tumble like the guys who worked the yard. No, I like to pay my bills and go home with exactly as many holes as I had when I came to work. Hence, why I was often stuck here in B-dorm with the dorm rats. B-dorm held all the workers, especially since E-dorm had been forbidden to do grounds work anymore. Mine was the dorm that had the food service, the groundskeepers, the medical orderlies, the confinement orderlies, anything really. It was usually a dull existence. In between pulling workers and sending them to their assigned areas, my biggest concern was finding a good book to read. But sometimes there were other difficulties. Difficulties like this fellow here, who had decided to try my patience with something that was undoubtedly of very little consequence. He had raised his fist to knock again when I slammed the flap open hard enough to make him jump. Bang on my window one more time, and you'll be picking your crap up off the quad when I get done tossing your bunk. Now what do you want? He reached into his bag, the net bag where they keep all their laundry, and pulled out a pair of boxers with a long brown streak up the back. This is the second time this week I've gotten a pair of dirty boxers, Sarge. I need clean underwear. This is not acceptable. He stopped talking when he saw the look on my face. I'll take care of it, I told him through gritted teeth. He left the boxers on the ledge, and I called Gilbert, the B1 houseman. Gilbert's an old-timer, 50 if he's a day, but he's probably the best cleaner at the prison. He takes the god-awful selection of chemicals that Caustics provides us and does wonders with them. He cleans the showers, waxes the floors, keeps the man smell to a minimum, and generally keeps the dorm livable. He also dispenses the clothes when they come in, so he'd be the first one to talk to about the state of the laundry. He came up on the run, and I directed him to the laundry room near the back of the dorm, where I showed him the dirty underwear. Any idea what's going on with these? Gilbert shook his head. Nah, Sarge, it's been happening a lot, though. I wash my drawers in the sink now to stop this from happening. Well, is there any way that we can talk to someone who works in laundry? Gilbert shook his head. Nah, I don't think so. I pulled my eyebrows together. Why not? What side do they live on? I'll just have a word with them. They don't live in B-dorm, boss. They fired all the laundry guys in Beedorm a couple of weeks ago. Didn't you know that? I should have, but I didn't. I went to the station and checked the schedule, but Gilbert was right. Laundry was no longer on the list. No problem, I thought. Maybe they had just given the contract to Edorm, so they had something to do. I dialed up Edorm and asked the officer if they were responsible for the workers for the laundry room. I figured after she checked her list, she would confirm my suspicions, and then I'd ask her to yell at them for their poor work. Instead, what she told me was, nope, Edorm doesn't have any work contracts. Not after that nonsense at Halloween. I assumed that Beedorm was providing the workers. I called a few other dorms, but none of them were providing the laundry workers for any of the shifts. So I called the captain to see if he knew. He was a little grumpy about being bothered by a question that should have been obvious. Well, duh, it's one of the programs allocated to Miss Evergreen. I'd forgotten about Miss Evergreen. She'd been at the prison for about a month and a half, and she had spent most of that time lurking and observing. She came to the dorms and asked questions about what we did and how things worked. She was very interested in the day-to-day operation of the prison, and now it appeared they were giving her things to do. Okay, well, where's she getting her workers from? I'm sure I don't know, but I do know I have things to do that don't involve answering silly questions. Get back to work and don't worry about it. I got back to work, but I never quite stopped worrying about it. I found myself looking at the laundry room building, wondering who was working in there. They never came out, and they never stopped. The lights were on 24/7, and the hum of the dryers and the washers was a constant. Laundry carts came out, but no one ever came out with them. What's more, I never saw any food go to the laundry building. Whoever was in there, they were getting food brought in from the outside, and I came to believe that it must be outside workers. That made sense, but there were no new cars in the parking lot either. I didn't see anyone new at the canteen, no new faces in training, so just who were the ones working in the laundry room? It became kind of a mania in me, and I had to know. The opportunity presented itself in a strange way one evening. The call came to Beedorm on one of those nights when I actually had a helping hand, and the sergeant working the yard had a very modest request. I need you to do the body alarm test tonight. I have the box of alarms in my office, so just come and grab them after count clears and get after it. I told him I would do it, but inside I was pumping my fist. Body alarms are these little boxes you wear on your uniform, so you can press it if you're in trouble. Most officers don't use them. They think they're silly, but we still have to test them. We hit the buttons at different areas on the compound to find holes in the network. We do it every night without fail, and one of the places we do it is laundry. I came to the captain's office to find gate keys in the body alarm box just sitting on the desk. I went to the rec yard first. As much as I just wanted to go to laundry and see it, I'd decided that I'd go to laundry last. If I got caught and there were questions, I could always just tell them that I was going to go do the body alarm test. Most of the time, you could get away with a lot of things if you just pretended you were supposed to be there. Don't believe me? Wear a high visibility vest to a construction site and see who asks you for ID. Anyway, I went to the rec yard, the barber shop, and the canteen office, where I triggered the alarms. I wouldn't have to go into laundry, I told myself. I remembered from my time in training that there were big glass windows on the main door. All I needed to do was peek in, to get a good look at their uniforms and how many were there, and it might help to solve the mystery. That would be enough. Just a quick look. I triggered the body alarm for the captain's office, center gate, and food service. Maybe if I could double back around to the rear while I was checking, I could see how they were getting in. Unless I thought they were using a tunnel of some kind. Everyone had heard the rumors about the tunnels under Stragview, especially the story about the secret prison underneath this one, but most of us thought it was all bullshit. That being said, secret tunnels for quick evacuation wouldn't be too far outside the realm of possibility. My mind was whirring with possibilities as I got closer to my goal, and I was giddy with anticipation. I triggered the body alarms for education, the library, and property. What if, my mind wondered, it was something really crazy? What if it was like mole men or monsters or illegal migrant workers or something? This was Stragview, and nothing was really off the table. People always talked about ghosts and ghouls in this place, monsters in the grass and monster rats under the prison, so why was the idea of monsters in the laundry room any weirder? I triggered the alarm for medical, dental, and mental health, and suddenly it was time to go check on my suspicions. Normally, whoever was doing laundry would just stick their arm through the hole in the fence and trigger the body alarm. But I had a plan for that. I put my arm through the opening in the fence and pretended to trigger the button before calling Control to see if I'd gotten a signal. Control, do you copy the body alarm for laundry? Negative, Officer Huffsler. I pretended to do it again, and they again told me that they had no body alarm triggered. They suggested I get closer, and I told them that I would. I had keys to the gate, so I opened the service gate to the laundry room and dummy locked it behind me just in case. If I needed to make a quick escape, I didn't want to worry with locks and gates. I slunk towards the laundry room building, probably looking guilty as hell, and triggered the alarm. Controls said they had a confirmed signal and that the alarm check was successful. I put the box under my arm and checked through the little window as I got low. It was dark inside, but I imagined I could see something. It was subtle, but there was something moving in there. Beyond the door was a little observation post where the laundry officer usually sat, and I let myself in as I crept inside to take an even closer look. I crept inside, hunkering behind the desk, and as I peeked out, I saw that my assessment of something strange hadn't even come close. They were walking the floor, doing laundry, folding clothes, and under the safety lights, they were damn near transparent. It wasn't until they moved into the dark corners that I saw them closer, and I saw them far closer than I wanted to. They were ghosts or spirits or something. They were clearly inmates, or had been, and they made up a ghostly crew of bodies that shuffled and went about their tasks. There was no need for guards or custodians. These inmates went about their tasks quickly and efficiently. Some of them looked normal enough, pale and ghostly, but like regular folks, but some of them had blood on their forms or purple marks on their throats or around their eyes. A fellow shuffled by with a cart as I watched, and I could see a long slash mark on his neck. Another had finger marks on his neck, and the capillaries of his eyes were red and pulsating. I felt my lower lip tremble. The warden was using the spirits of Stragview to do his laundry. I knew there were plenty of ghosts in this place. Violence was at a premium around here, but seeing them put to work was something else. This was weird, even by this place's standards. I didn't know how they had done it, but they'd managed to make this place work for them yet again. I must have peeked a little too long, however, because I suddenly felt eyes on me, and the feeling was like bugs on my skin. I glanced towards it and saw someone standing over by the dryer, a big galoot with a ripped open throat and angry staring eyes who was glaring at me with hatred. Whether he saw me or not, I wasn't sure, but I scuttled and managed to make it through the door and back out the gate before anyone came after me. I dropped off the body alarms and the keys, but The control guard must have seen something on my face because he asked if everything was okay. I told him it was fine. I was just a little winded from walking so far, and he wished me a good night as I went back to my dorm. I thought I had made it out scot-free, but as I was getting ready to leave that morning, I got a call from the captain. "Warden wants to talk with you," he said, sounding about as excited as I was. "He say why?" I asked, thinking I had a pretty good idea why. "No, but he rarely does." So after my relief got there, I headed for the tower, walked up the spiral staircase, and knocked on the iron door at the top. I knew the warden was using it as an office, but it almost looked like he was living here. Did he ever leave? Maybe he found it easier to live on site, but I could think of better places to lay my head. The tower was creepy, a creaking relic of a bygone age, and the walk up the stairs had been very unsafe feeling. "Come in, Officer Huffsler." If the tower was creepy, then the lair of the warden was like something out of a Dracula novel. It was all hardwood and long bookshelves, tapered candles, and trophy cases of strange objects. And there, in the middle, was the warden, with his big orange tomcat on his desk. The two glowered at me, but the warden's mouth was smiling as he did it. "I heard you had a little adventure last night," he said, steepling his fingers and grinning even wider. "I suppose. I had to do the body alarm test, but that was about my only adventure." He responded, the noise resonating in his throat. "Well, whatever you may have seen while you were doing your duty, I trust you'll keep it to yourself. I don't think it was nearly as bad as you believe, and you may not have understood what you saw. Let's keep it on the hush for now. What do you say?" I nodded, not having to be asked twice. I still didn't quite believe what I'd seen, but I didn't for a minute think I had mistaken it for something else. Those had been dead people, people who no longer lived, and this smiling ghoul wasn't going to convince me otherwise. "I'll let you get some sleep," he said, but as my hand wrapped around the doorknob, he threw out his last word on the matter. "I don't want to hear any rumors about laundry, though. We wouldn't want it to get back that you were telling tales." I didn't answer. I just left, and I haven't been near laundry since. From now on, I'll just stick my arm through the gate like everyone else and let my curiosity stay unsated. I sipped my coffee and stared at the half-finished page in the mouth of my old Underwood. 3 days. 3 days, and this was what I had to show for it. I put my head in my hands and leaned back in the squeaky old office chair that had been here when I arrived. I couldn't get my mind on my work today, and that was a big problem. I'd rented the cabin for 2 weeks, 2 weeks of bliss away from screaming children and honey-do lists, and now I was 3 days deep with nothing to show for it but 3 paragraphs and writer's block. Smooth jazz caressed me from the speakers of my little CD player, but today its chords might have well been breaking glass. The wind blew outside, kicking up leaves against that glass, and as the jazz played on, I heard it again. There was something else under the surface of that jangling wind, the rattling sound that had been breaking my concentration for the last 3 days. A maddening, almost skeletal sound that wouldn't stop. I turned back to my work, but within minutes, I had stopped again. The story was supposed to be about... What the hell was the story supposed to be about again? a horror writer in the woods, or something cliche like that. It had all seemed so well put together when I'd driven up here 3 days ago. A writer in the woods, writing his story, while something supernatural lurks around him, making his stories come to life. I tapped absent-mindedly at the keys for a few more minutes before I growled and yanked the paper out of the underwood, throwing it in the garbage can. The underwood was a vanity, and I knew it. I own 3 computers, one of them a very nice and very expensive MacBook. But I used the underwood because it made me feel like a professional. Someone had told me at a convention or a book signing or something that real writers use typewriters. So I went out and paid an excessive amount of money for this ancient engine of destruction. It took a lot of money to keep this golem up and running, too, but I paid it, toting this heavy thing around in a case that was half as expensive as it had been, and felt that my writing was better for it. It would not have shocked me to learn that many writers had similar totems. The wind scuttled through the trees again, and this time I jumped when the leaves spattered against the window. It sounded like someone throwing a fistful of rocks against the glass, but that wasn't what had surprised me. I had been listening for that clattering sound, the almost musical knocking that sounded so familiar, and the sound of the skeletal leaves had caught me off guard. I cursed as I pulled the half-started sheet and threw it away. I had laid across the keyboard in my panic, and now it was ruined. I drew another sheet down into the guts of the old contraption and began to write again, getting a little further this time as I sipped my coffee, becoming quite happy with the results. The mountain path ran up and up and up as he scaled the climb and made his way to the cabin near the top. The snow lay like delicate lace upon the ground, and the tires of his Dodge Charger crunched into the snow as I stopped. A Charger? The writer hadn't had a Charger in the other writings I'd done. The Charger was mine, a big black brute that now hunkered outside the cabin as I wasted time inside. What was the writer driving again? He couldn't have gotten a Charger up here in the snow anyway. The car was great for highways and gravel roads, but snow and hills would have left it parked and waiting for more favorable conditions. I considered leaving it, but it just wouldn't do. I dragged out the correction tape and changed it to Jeep instead. Still, I wish the writer could experience the bliss of owning something I had wanted since I was a kid. The car out front had been a present, a reward for good service, which hadn't stopped my wife from complaining about it. Really, a muscle car? That's so like you, Derek. Leave it to you to publish a book and have a midlife crisis all in the same week. She didn't get it, though. This had been a reward when my first novel had sold 500,000 copies. I'd paid cash for it on the lot and felt like somewhere in my past, a 12-year-old version of myself was grinning and pumping his fist. My old man had wanted a Charger, had talked longingly about getting one anytime he saw one, but he had been a welder for a rinky-dink construction outfit and had disdained books almost as much as he disdained his poof of a son for writing them. Well, now Dad was in the ground, and look who was screaming down the road in a Charger. I changed my mind again. The car stayed, and changed it again before moving on. Pulled his bags from the car and walked to the cabin. 2 weeks of peace and quiet to finish his book. 2 weeks of just him and his old typewriter in the picturesque cabin. Going up had been an adventure, but going down again would be suicide, and he only meant to tempt fate once. For better or worse, he was up here for 2 weeks. He had enough food, smokes, whiskey, and toilet paper for 14 days, and if it ran out, then he supposed he would just have to do without. His editor said his new book had to be ready before October, or he might as well shelve it forever, and he meant to have it ready. I nodded as I took the sheet off the typewriter, liking where this was going. The writer was at the cabin now. That was a start. Now I just had to get the rest of it. I wished my editor had told me I only had 2 weeks to write my latest mediocre piece of trash. My editor was a nice guy, but he was definitely more than a little spineless. He was more than willing to wheedle and kiss ass when what I really needed was a good boot in the backside. A deadline or an ultimatum might have motivated me more than what I actually had going on. It hadn't been a deadline, but due dates that pushed me to get to work on the book. The car was paid off, but the house was still a work in progress. Money from my first book was also beginning to run dry. The cabin had been an expense that I didn't really have, but if it birthed another book, then I suppose it was worth it. The wind hit the side of the house again, and I heard those unsettling wind chimes bang together for the 1,000th time. I couldn't figure out where they were. I hadn't seen any wind chimes when I came in, or I would have taken them down after the first night. At first they'd been a little interesting, but as time passed, they became downright grating. They were different from any wind chimes I'd ever heard. It didn't sound like metal, but it didn't sound like wood either. It sounded hollow, kind of like the leaves that kept rattling against the glass. The first night they had woken me up more than once. When I did sleep, it had come into my dreams, and the dreams would have made a good book all their own. Someone knocked, and I jerked a little as I went to see who it was. I was honestly a little glad for the distraction, ready to chalk this whole thing up as a wash the longer it went on. Seemed like I was honestly just looking for a reason to take a break, and I worried I wouldn't have anything to prop up the cost of this trip. My wife was going to have a fit, very likely, but I think the bigger disappointment would be that I didn't have a book for her to proofread. Melina had loved Feist, my first book, and it had held us together through some of the rougher times. She, not my editor, had pushed me to finish it, and I'd seen her read the battered old hard copy I'd gotten for Christmas a lot during our marriage. That was why I had to finish this one so desperately. I needed to remind her that I could still be the man that she had fallen in love with. The man on the other side of the door seemed relieved when he saw me, and I opened it with what I hoped was a friendly greeting. James had been hesitant to rent me the cabin, despite the good weather we'd been having, and it had taken a little coaxing to get the story out of him. We'd been corresponding for a month before he let me make a reservation, and the first night here, after a couple of handles of good whiskey, he had told me the reason. It appeared I wasn't the only one who had rented the place to get some work done, and the last guy had left him holding the bag in more ways than one. I came to check on him pretty regular, but one day, he just wasn't here. His truck was here, his stuff was here, but he was just gone. They never found him, but I keep looking for him when I go on my hikes sometimes. He didn't seem to like the sound of the weird wind chimes either, and he couldn't tell me what the sound was. "Hey," he said, his smile only slightly worried. "Just coming to make sure you didn't need anything. I brought some wood, too. They say there might be a blow-up tonight, and I didn't want you to freeze up here." I looked outside, craning my neck as if I expected to see the words "snow" written in the sky by some huge hand. "In September?" I asked, thinking he must be joking. He shrugged. "It happens some years. The weather here is temperamental, so do you need anything?" I shook my head. "I think I'm all set. I've got enough supplies for a month at least." That had been by design. Once I came up here, I didn't want to do anything but write and sleep and exist. Clearly I was making a botch of one of those things, but this guy didn't need to know about that. He nodded. "Well, if you need anything, let me know. I've got an old snowmobile if you get stuck up here, but I don't think it'll be that bad. Your car looks heavy enough to make it down, even if it snowed a foot of powder." I nodded, resisting the urge to tell him it was a Charger, and we parted ways. I gave it another half hour in front of the Underwood before shaking my head and going to get the whiskey I'd brought with me. Sometimes great writing needed a little lubricant. All the great writers knew that. That was why most of them had been drunks. A couple of handles in and I was ready to write. I got back to work as the sun set behind the smeary windows. As I walked the writer through the setting up, I must have hit a hard head of steam because I started really banging it out as afternoon stretched into evening. I had a couple more glasses of whiskey, and as the paper got harder and harder to see, I found the pages were stacking up. The rattling kept right on coming, but I was too drunk to care. The juices were flowing, and when I slipped sideways halfway into my 6th or 7th glass, I saw something hitting the window as I passed out. They were small, the white flakes looking very wet as they slapped against the glass, and I slid sideways. They were small, the white flakes looking very wet as they slapped against the glass and slid sideways. I hadn't really had a lot of experience with snow, but I remembered something like this from when I was a kid. The snow hadn't stuck, but I had laid in bed watching it hit the window as my nightlight had thrown soft light across the glass. I lay there in a stupor and remembered that, and when the wind chimes came again, hollow and ethereal, I remembered something else. I remembered watching something on TV, a 5-tet of dancing skeletons as they wiggled and wobbled in the autumn air. Somehow I imagined that the sound I heard would be like that. The sound of hollow bones banging against each other would make a sound like that. But the more I tried to fix on it, the foggier the dreams became. Finally, as my drunken dreams usually did, I was suddenly awake, and I'd traveled through time to a new place and a new when. I was shivering on the floor of the cabin, the inside suddenly very chilly, and the snow against the windows making the insides shadowy. It was sometime in the mid-morning, after dawn but before lunch, and the drift was up to the lip of the windowsill. I guess it had been more than a few inches, and as I staggered to my feet, I looked out and saw that my Charger was covered in snow up to the door handles. Jesus, it had just dumped 3 feet overnight. Luckily, I had wood and bottled water, so I got myself a drink to cut the sharp edge of my hangover and got the fire going in the fireplace. As the snow rattled against the window and the hollow chimes continued to clang together, I sat down to look over what I had written. For drunken ramblings, it was pretty good. They were almost on topic, too, all of them laying out the strange sound that kept assaulting the writer as he worked. Wasn't the direction I'd intended to go, but I liked what my drunken self had put together so far. He sat at the keys, fingers ready for battle, but as they went to work, he heard the sound of it as it scraped across his nerves. It was a hollow clunking, the sound of old plastic bottles falling downstairs. And as the wind outside pushed at the house incessantly, the sound continued. It was a mystery at first, something he chased, but soon it would become maddening. That was pretty good, I reflected. The writer went looking for the sound, but couldn't seem to find anything. There were no chimes on the porch, front or back, and there were none hanging from the eaves. He checked the ragged trees around the house and even looked under the porch, but he couldn't find anything. There were no wind chimes anywhere. and that was when he noticed the window. Window? I said, flipping the page. What window? This story had taken a turn I hadn't planned on, but now he was talking about windows. The cabin he was in was supposed to be a single story, no upstairs to have a window. Of course, I hadn't meant to give the guy a charger either, and now he had one. The story was taking on a mystery feel, and I found that I liked it. I sat back down to write, feeding more paper in, but as I clicked away at the keys, I found that the threads just wouldn't come. It wasn't the story I had in mind, and now it was going off into uncharted waters. I tore a few pages out and tossed them, grunting as the light cut into my vision, and by noon, I was looking at the half-empty bottle again. Maybe a little of the old inspiration could be found in its depths. 3 shots later, and I was off again. The window was important. There was someone in the window. He could see them, but he didn't know how to get there. There were no stairs, no way for anyone to get up there, so how were they there? I took another shot and kept writing. Suddenly, the cabin I was in and the cabin I was writing about were one and the same. There was a stranger in the cabin, someone lurking in the walls, and the writer felt like if he didn't find them, then they would surely drive him crazy. They were the ones making the noise. They were responsible for the hollow chimes, and if he wanted to keep his sanity, then the writer needed to find them. I passed out again that night, waking up in the morning with an even nastier hangover and about 20 pages of new material. I could get used to this whole getting drunk and waking up with pages deal. The writer had continued his own book, a book within a book, but his mind kept wandering to that person in the upper story. He had called the realtor he had rented the place from, but the man had assured him that the window was aesthetic. There was nothing up there. The writer didn't believe him, and reflected on a story the man had told him about another writer who had gone missing in the house, a writer who had gone missing under mysterious circumstances. He'd been working on his novel, a long mystery that he seemed to be making progress on, when he suddenly vanished. His truck was there, his things were there, but he was gone. I searched for him, but there was no sign. He kept a journal, and the journal talked a lot about strange sounds that he had heard when the wind blew. It was the rattling, hollow clatter of chimes, and the writer became quite mad. The realtor said this, and he had found holes in the walls where the man had gone searching for them, and he had charged the man's estate for the damages in his absence. I hoped the guy who had rented me the cabin wouldn't mind that I borrowed his story, but it was really coming along now. I had some idea where it was going, and one look outside told me I wasn't going anywhere. The snow was up to the porch now, and I had to force the door open to go check on a theory. As the house in the story became the house I was staying in, at least in my mind, I wanted to see if there was a window out there. Maybe I was working elements of real life into my tale, and as I tromped through the snow, I was a little relieved to see that there was no window over the porch. The roof rose into a upside-down V, and though there might be an attic up there somewhere, it wasn't big enough for a room. I started to go back inside, but something told me to walk around a little bit. I'd made a full circuit of the house and was heading back to the front porch when my foot came down on something and sent me sprawling. It had been small and slippery, the object rolling out treacherously as I turned, and as I lay there in the snow, I looked up and found the window. It was round, not a bay window like I had talked about in the story, and as I squinted, I thought I could see something up there. It was subtle, a dark outline, but it was definitely person-shaped. I reached down into the snow to see if I could find what I had slipped on, and came up with a cracked but still intact shot glass. The idea that I had come out here before the snow was very deep seemed to make sense. I'd come out here while I was drunk and looked at this window, and that was why it had stuck so fast in my mind. I'd seen it, seen the person-shaped shadow, and my mind had started running. It had been like that with Feist, too. I had seen something, a little dog hunting ground squirrels one afternoon, and my mind had raced along like one of those little squirrels. I spent the next 3 days writing, drinking, and nursing my pounding head in the morning. By the end of the first week, I had my story, but not my ending. The snow didn't melt, but it didn't grow any faster after that night. It froze into a tightly packed little hillock, and my expedition outside was very chilly. I could have driven through them if I had needed to get out, but going down the mountain with 3 feet of snow on the ground would have been close to suicide. The radio had said the snow would melt before it was time to leave, so I took it as a sign to just keep writing. The writer, my writer, had found the journal of the writer that had gone missing. It was hidden behind some books in the reading nook, and he had immersed himself in the man's ramblings. The writer was being slowly driven crazy by the sound of the wind chimes, but he believed that they were talking to him as well. They wanted to be found. They wanted to tell him a great secret. And as he searched for the secrets of the cabin, so did I. I started looking for a way into the attic. It had to be somewhere, but the house was devoid of any of the usual loft entrances I was used to seeing. There were no ceiling entrances, no pull-down ladders, and as my time began to wane, I thought of something I hadn't. Taking a leaf from the Scooby-Doo notebook, I started looking for secret entrances. The book had ground to a halt, the writer stuck trying to find his own way into the secret room, but I figured once I discovered the source of the wind chimes, I would have my ending too. I was starting to consider making some holes in the wall myself when I noticed something I should have right away. By the reading nook, there was a portion of the ceiling that was curved. It curved up, the rest of the ceiling being mostly flat, but it was enough to notice that this would be the most obvious place for a stairwell. I started moving the bookcase, sliding them to the side as I looked for the source, and was rewarded with a doorway. It was so seamless that I could believe that no one had found it. Maybe even the guy who had rented it before me had known about it, though that seemed like a stretch. The doorway squalled on rusty hinges as it came open, and I took the stairs slowly and deliberately. If someone was up there, then they would have surely heard me. But I suppose they already knew I was down there. As I came to the top, I froze as the person shape came into view. They were standing about a foot from the window, just staring in the direction of the muted light. And the longer I looked, the more I realized they weren't standing. The person would have had a hard time standing, especially in their condition. They moved ever so slightly as the wind came in through the eaves, and as it did, I heard the hollow sound of the chimes. They swayed to and fro, their bones held together with the thinnest of tendons, and some of the bones on the ground showed that they had been falling apart as time went by. I closed the hatch and called the man who had rented the cabin to me. I had to let him know that I had found the writer. Turned out I would be leaving on time, but I'd have to finish the book at home. The police had a lot of questions, as did the guy I rented the cabin from, For starters, he was unaware that the place had an attic. He had inherited it from his uncle and had done little but rent it out for the last 5 years. When the guy had disappeared in it last year, he had just assumed he had wandered off in the woods, but it appeared that the writer had discovered the secret passage and how to close it behind himself. They had found the writer's screenplay in the attic, along with his body, the body that I had been hearing all this time. He was little more than 4 arms, leg bones, and rib cage now, but his body had deteriorated until his bones were being held together by the thinnest of cartilage and skin. No one knew why he had decided to hang himself up there. He hadn't left a journal like the missing writer in my story, but he had a history of antidepressants and mental health issues. The owner of the cabin said he was glad to have finally found him, but I think I'll end my book a little differently. Even as I drive down the mountain, I can see the ending of the book coming together. The writer discovers a secret room where the realtor hides the bodies of the writers whose stories he steals, and the writer manages to fight him off before he becomes his last victim. Should be a good ending and a great story for the book circuit after I publish it. It isn't every day that you get to be part of a real-life mystery, after all.
Okay, Dunstan, take it slow and tell me what you see.
Dunstan reached for the shoe, but his hand shook a little. The little sneaker looked like someone had pulled it out of a waterlogged ditch, and it looked like it might fit a toddler. Dunstan had seen a lot of terrible things in the time he'd been here, and he wasn't sure he wanted to add any more to the long list of things that lived rent-free in his head. It was weird, though. He couldn't remember a lot of them, just how they had made him feel at the time. They'd made him feel small and hopeless, but the doctor had taken that away from him, and he was glad. They had haunted his dreams when he reached for them, but now he felt half full. It was like something was missing. It was harder to define. It reminded him of poking his tongue into a hole where a tooth had been. He knew there had been a tooth there once, but now it was gone, and maybe he sometimes wondered where that tooth had went to and why it had left at all.
Dunstan, are you okay?
Dunstan nodded. Just a little scared. I never know what I'm gonna see, but it's rarely nice.
Life is rarely nice, Dunstan. Best to get those thoughts out of the way right up front. The world is unkind to people like us, Dunstan, so we have to help where we can. Let's continue. We have to make sure you're ready for midterms tomorrow.
Dunstan sighed, putting 2 fingers on the shoe as he let the waves of memory flood over him. He's 2. God, he's barely out of diapers. He's playing by the creek. His father is fishing not far away. The creek is deep. It's up to the dad's knees, and he's a big fella. The kid sees a frog. He goes after it, and he chases it a ways. You can hear the reel clicking, and the kid knows his da has a big catch on the line. He chases the frog down the stream. It's a big one, too, and he's running along the edge, and Dunstan shuddered, goose flesh prickling on his arm. He fell in. God, he was gone in a second. He bobbed up just long enough to get a breath, and then he was back under again. He came up again. The stream took him quick, though. I don't even think his father knew he was gone. He was dead. He was dead before he could take a third breath. He never surfaced again. He drowned, and he tried to yell for his mother as he Dunstan took his hand off the shoe and wiped his eyes as he tried to forget the way the kid had wanted his mother to save him. Dunstan had never had a mother, never had anyone really to look after him. He had Mary, he supposed, but she wasn't his mom. She would find someone else to worry about. Had probably found someone else already. And that was the difference. Somewhere there was a mother who was hoping against hope that the owner of that little shoe would come back someday. Dunstan was going to ruin those hopes. I hate it sometimes. I hate what I am. The little hand patted his. We all serve as we must. I know it brings sadness, but you bring closure to those who may not have it otherwise. You've helped people, Dunstan. Don't doubt that. Dunstan tried to smile, but he just couldn't do it. There's something I want you to do for me, Dr. Hammarskjöld said. It's not part of the curriculum, you understand, but I was wondering if you could do me this small favor. It would bring me some comfort, if nothing else. Dunstan looked down at the thing in his hand and had to swallow the sawdust in his throat. It was a pen, a fancy pen, and it reminded him of the one he'd owned once upon a time. Whose is it? Dunstan asked. I'd prefer not to say, the little man said, looking far away, and I would prefer if you didn't talk to people about it either. Just tell me what you see. Don't hold anything back. Dunstan took a deep breath and reached for the pen. He saw the girl as she took her first step. She walked shakily, the woman in front of her smiling as she spread her arms out to catch her. She was laughing as she walked, the woman crying as she called her name again and again. The girl was waving next, walking into kindergarten as her mother cried again and left. He saw her as she rose through school, like a shooting star. She had friends. She excelled. She was loved, and she loved others. She graduated high school, went to college, opened her own psychiatry practice. She never knew her father, something she always wished that she had, but something that her mother would never give her. Someone had gotten this pen on his request, and Dunstan believed he knew why. It's your daughter, Dunstan said, his breath coming in slow gasps. Yes, Dr. Hammarskjöld said, after a few seconds. A fling from college, who kindled. She was my first and only love, but I knew better than to have children they could use against me. How is she? Please, tell me what you saw. Dunstan spent some time telling him about the life of a daughter he would never see, and who would be safer for never knowing him. Rebecca came into the little room when her number was called. She didn't like it. This was where the little doctor took the kids he worked with, and she didn't want to work with him. She hated him, and if he came into the room, she couldn't exactly be trusted not to put her hands on him. Rebecca, take a seat, said a woman over the loudspeaker. It wasn't Dr. Hammarskjöld, it was the woman who helped their teacher sometimes. Rebecca took a seat on the doctor's table in the middle of the room and got ready for whatever was expected of her. Lay down and get comfortable. Today's exercise is going to test your dream-telling ability. We want a good reading, so please tell us everything you see while under. Can you do that? Yes, Rebecca said. Dreaming for her wasn't much like it was for other people. Other people rarely remembered what they dreamed, but Rebecca remembered them all. She had to. That was her gift. It was her curse. Just lay back and relax, get comfortable, and be at ease. Rebecca lay down and tried to quiet her mind, but it was difficult to get comfortable when commanded to. Ditto for sleeping. She was expectant and nervous. What if she couldn't do it? What if all this was in vain? What if, once you reach 10, you may begin? Her skin went cold. It was him. He was here, and he was attempting to use his power on her. Despite herself, she was getting sleepy. She felt a yawn coming on, and even knowing what he was doing wouldn't save her from it. She knew what was going on, but despite the yawn building, she repeated the next part to him out of reflex. Once you reach 9, you'll enter a relaxed state of mind, she whispered, but still, he must have heard. Once you reach 8, you'll be feeling great, his voice intoned, and Rebecca felt her eyes grow heavy. She wanted to talk about how unfair this was and about how this wasn't right, but instead, she read the next part from memory. Once you reach 7, you'll be floating in heaven. Rebecca fought against it, but she knew it was in vain. Her eyes were getting heavy, and her words, his words, were flowing out without her command. She was entering that receptive state that the doctor had always placed her in, and she was worried that this time she might not come back. Who was to say what might happen this time? Would he kill her? Surely not. She was a government asset now. But who was to say that she wouldn't wake up looking as goofy and rattled as Dunstan did almost every day? She knew what Dr. Hammarskjöld was doing to him. It was the same thing that he had done to her. He made him forget, but it was what he was forgetting that she wasn't sure about. Once you reach 6, there are no conflicts, he crooned, waiting for her to go on. No, she moaned, shaking her head. No, you can't make me. Once you reach 6, there are no conflicts, he said slowly and dreamily this time, really worming his way in. Rebecca tried to fight him, but she just wasn't strong enough. Once you reach 5, your problems take a dive. The words burst out like she'd been holding her breath, and the return cadence sounded relieved. Once you reach 4, it's time to snore. Rebecca felt it coming on strong. The yawn that slipped out made her sick. Once you reach 3, you'll find your reprieve. She wanted to fight, but God, she was so tired, so exhausted. Once you reach 2, it's all up to you. She was drifting already, and those last words followed her down into sleep. Once you get to 1, it's over and done. She was floating in that black void as she waited for what dreams might come. Rebecca, can you hear me, sweetie? It was Mrs. Lloyd now, and that was fine. It would only be a nightmare if the little doctor had tried to speak to her. Yes, Rebecca said, her voice echoing in her head. What do you see? Nothing yet. It's just darkness. Is there anything? Anything at all that you can tell us about? There's something. It's just... Wait. It's starting to appear. I'm in the kindergarten. I'm floating above it, like I sometimes do in my dreams. I can see kids walking around, but they're walking very slowly. I can see them like they're moving underwater. They don't seem happy. They seem scared or upset. like people at a funeral. Good, good. What else do you see? There are 2 coffins in the cafeteria. One is big and one is small. There are people sitting in the cafeteria. There are people sitting in the cafeteria. They're looking at the coffins. There's 2 people in the cafeteria that have something on them. Something? Can you be more specific, dear? I think it's blood. One of them is Ryan. His forehead is covered in blood, and so are his hands. The other one, oh God, it's Masha. Not Masha, she's just a little girl. No, not Masha. She wouldn't do it. She wouldn't mean to. Describe it to us, Mrs. Lloyd was saying, but Rebecca couldn't. She was screaming and flailing, her breath hitching in and out like she was having an asthma attack. Rebecca felt like she was dying, and then she felt sure of it as the voice of the little doctor fell over her again. Rebecca, it's okay. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. Heart rate slow. Anxiety fall. Nerves unclench. Back to base. Rebecca suddenly felt like a knot that's come undone in a rope. Her whole body was unbound. Her nerves and anxiety seemed to return to normal. It was like someone had rebooted her. Rebecca lay back as the peace flooded through her. But even then, there was that quiet voice that whispered that she'd not calmed herself. This was his doing, and she shouldn't go so quietly into it. She was drifting off into quiet sleep now, but still that voice harangued her. She would fight harder next time, Rebecca promised. Next time. Well, that was close, Miss Lloyd said, expelling a mouthful of cigarette smoke as she did. Dr. Hammarskjöld wrinkled his nose at the smell. I wish you wouldn't do that in close quarters. Miss Lloyd shrugged. When else am I supposed to smoke? These personal sessions today are eating into my smoke breaks. What happened there at Hammarskjöld? Is she actually seeing the future, or is she just making it up? The sight wouldn't have snatched her if she was faking, and her brain activity certainly reads as if she's seeing something. I think she's developing some kind of projecting ability, too. Nighttime indicators have brought back readings of her sending in her sleep. I think she's traveling while she's sleeping. Mrs. Lloyd coughed on a lungful of smoke at that. Is that safe? She might stumble across things best left unseen if she goes snooping. Dr. Hammarskjöld doubted it, but it was a definite concern. I think it's still too soon for her to know what she's doing, but it will need watching. The security chief isn't going to like it, Miss Lloyd said, as she fished out another tar-more and lit the end. When does he ever? Dr. Hammarskjöld asked, and Miss Lloyd only nodded. Sorry to make you wait. It's a red-letter day for the blue band class. Gerald was following at a respectful distance behind Dr. Hammarskjöld as he led him to the new test. This one is one of my most devious tests yet. It will be a true test of your power, and I hope it will give us an adequate measure of it. He hadn't noticed that Gerald had stopped yet. He just kept walking and blabbering as Gerald stared at the door. It was unassuming enough Just a door like any other, but when he glanced down, a strange thing happened. Underneath the door, like a pair of roots from a tree, were a pair of strings. There was a blue one and a black one, and they had never sat so closely together. The black string was death. It always had been. But the blue string was his GPS. It led him through life like a magic fairy, and it had never failed to keep him safe. Now it appeared to be leading him to death, and that was confusing. It had never done that before, not once, and it had never occurred to Gerald that death might be the destination of his life. Gerald had never honestly thought of the final destination for his life, but he supposed he would die one day. There were worse things than dying, after all. He lived with people who did not seem to value his life, people who would be happy to take it from him. And surely living like that was worse. This was confusing as well, though. "Something the matter?" Dr. Hammarskjöld asked. "What's beyond that door?" "Bluebeard's 7 other wives," Dr. Hammarskjöld intoned. And when Gerald looked at him like he was crazy, the little doctor giggled. "Administrative hallway boy, nothing else." Gerald reached a trembling hand out for the handle, but Dr. Hammarskjöld gently covered it with his and pulled it back. "Best not to. The security chief would be angry if a student went down there. Come, we have things to do before midterms tomorrow." They headed for whatever the little doctor had set up, but Gerald cast another look over his shoulder as they walked away. There was something important behind that door, and Gerald meant to find out what. They sat in the cafeteria after lessons that day, all of them too tired to go on. Masha massaged her temples. Dex and Ryan leaned back in their chairs like they might drop, and even Gerald had nothing smart to say that evening. They were all worn out, and there'd be no time spent in the game room tonight. If today was hard, then tomorrow would be even worse. "I can't imagine what more we could do tomorrow that we didn't do today," Dex said. "I can't imagine," Ryan said listlessly, and he moved his food around his plate. "At least yours is just physical. I'd kill to run an obstacle course after a day of nothing but forming images in my mind." Dunstan wanted to say something, wanted to add to the discussion, but he couldn't honestly remember what he had done that day. It was strange, like someone had scrubbed the chalkboard after a busy class and left nothing but dust. He knew he had helped Dr. Hammarskjöld with something, but he couldn't remember what it was. He noticed Rebecca looking at him oddly and glanced away as he took another bite of mac and cheese. "So, if there's no grades, then what is all this for?" Heather said, looking at the mashed potato mountain that she had formed. "Maybe it depends on what department you get when you graduate," Daniel said. "If you graduate," Masha said. "Sounds like most people don't graduate. Most of the people who work here seem to have, what's the word, washed out?" Dexter laughed. "Where'd you hear that, little sis?" "I don't remember. It was just something I picked up from somewhere. It's true, though, right?" "I think I remember Dr. Hammarskjöld using it once, before he stopped talking abruptly. Maybe we just see the ones who couldn't make it, though. Besides the little doctor, most of the people don't seem particularly well adjusted," Gerald said dreamily. Dex wanted to say something in defense of Cutter, but he had to admit they were right. Cutter was a competent trainer, but he usually reminded Dex more of the people who trained you for cage fighting than the people who probably trained you to work for the FBI or the military. If they weren't going to be working for the government, then who? It didn't make much sense to train them for no reason, but Dex supposed that there had to be a reason. There was always a purpose, an outcome, for people like this. There was always a cost that had to be justified. Well, all I know is that I'm going to sleep like the dead tonight, Dunstan said, getting up and picking up his plate. I think we should all get some rest. Most of you look done in. You don't look so good yourself, Dexter said. You look pretty peaky, my boy. I guess I feel a little peaky, Dunstan said, as he walked to the garbage can to throw away his scraps. You don't talk as much about the awful stuff you see anymore, Dex said as he got up to join him. I'm here for you if you need to talk about that. Don't just bottle it up, man. Nah, I'm fine, Dunstan said. It hardly makes an impression anymore. Really? 'Cause some of the stuff you were talking about was pretty grim. Yeah, but I found a way to cope, Dunstan said, his smile not quite as sane as he flashed it. I'm doing okay. Don't worry about me, Dex. Dex wasn't so sure, but what else could he do? All right, then. Well, get some rest done. Tomorrow's going to be more fun and games, I think. The two smacked hands, and then Dunstan was heading for the bathroom. He'd gotten a little queasy feeling in his guts, a random image of a kid's severed hand being thrown into a hole, and he wasn't sure he was going to be able to keep his dinner down. The memories of what he had seen weren't gone. Not really. The things he had seen were simply hidden behind a hazy glass that obscured them for a time. They would be back, and always, it seemed, at the worst possible time. He made it to the bathroom before the vomiting started, but it was a near thing. The food looked only slightly less appetizing as it swam in the bowl than it had on the plate, and he sent it down as he wiped his mouth on the back of his hand. They couldn't know how much pain he was in, how much turmoil, and they never would. It couldn't go on forever, but Dunstan would if he needed to. You okay? He looked up as Rebecca spoke and nearly splashed his shirt with water instead of his face. The bathroom was empty, but he still hadn't expected a girl to follow him in here. She was leaning against the wall as if she came here often, and Dunstan suddenly wondered how much time she spent in the men's room. Yeah, my dinner didn't sit well. Sorry if I worried you guys. I think it was less about what you ate and more about what you saw, wasn't it? Dunstan did feel the water slide down his shirt this time as he missed his face, sitting up sputtering as he wiped at his eyes. What? You see things, despite Dr. Hammershoal helping you forget. Isn't that right? How do you know about that? I have my own demons that the little doctor used to help me with. I know his work, and I know it doesn't last. What does he take from you? All the horrible things he makes you see? All the horrible things that have been done to those people? Dunstan wanted to deny it, but instead, he nodded. He does. He makes it manageable. He shouldn't have to, Rebecca said, half whispering. None of us should have to go through this. But we do, Dunstan said harshly, and there isn't anything we can do about it. He wiped his face and threw away the paper towel, a little harder than he strictly meant to. Why do you hate him so much? Truly, why? He doesn't hate you. He asks about you all the time. Why do you hate him? Why? Because he's the reason I'm here. He brought me here. He told them about me. If it weren't for him, I'd be at home with my mother and father. Maybe, but it's more likely that they already knew who you were. He helped you get here, but they would have had you in the end anyway. Rebecca didn't seem to have an answer for that. This is your life now, no matter what he did. Maybe it's time to just be okay with that. He left her there to contemplate that as he headed for the showers and then to bed, along with the other tired and weary students. She traveled again that night, though she didn't know she was doing it. She slid from the dormitory like a ghost, moving through the halls and familiar spaces. She saw Daniel in the media room, nursing a can of Sprite as he tried to stop shaking. He saw Cutter sitting with two of the snatchers in the cafeteria as they drank whiskey from small glasses. She saw a woman in the library that she did not know, but who wept ceaselessly over some book. They all had these lines over their heads, these angry lines that seemed to squirm over each other. It reminded her of cartoons when someone was angry, and she began to recognize them for what they were. She flowed through the kindergarten, moving where she would and seeing what she might see. She went into the classrooms, now empty, into the gym, into the green band room that she had never seen. She was looking for the places that the teachers went, the secret halls where the teachers watched and this mysterious security chief stayed. That was where she encountered something odd. It wasn't odd in the general sense. It was only a door. But it was odd to the new eyes that she possessed. To her new eyes, it bore the stink lines of something most foul. It was like a living embodiment of filth, and she did not want to touch it. She didn't want to know what lay beyond that door, but she needed to. She went through the door and found not another metal hallway, like so many of the others, but an earthen chute that led into the ground. It was strange. She hadn't seen real dirt since arriving here, but this place was nothing but a cave amidst surgical steel. She looked down the chute, not wanting to go down there, but knowing that she must. There was something important down there. There was something terrible down there. There was something down there she needed to see, and the truth would tear her apart. She went down into the earth, and at the bottom, she saw what awaited her. It was a serpent of pure darkness, a storm cloud of smoke and chaos. It rose up as she came into its lair, its voice that of a badly tuned instrument as it gives its dying breath to the audience. It was huge, taking up most of the space, and she heard the bones as it rolled towards her. She was smoke, unsubstantial, and she knew that it couldn't hurt her. She knew this, but it didn't bring her any comfort. As it rose to the ceiling and prepared to fall on her, she screamed and threw her hands up to protect herself. She awoke screaming in her bed an hour and a half before breakfast, and her cries were the alarm that woke everyone for midterms. Her friends tried to comfort her, and the teachers offered to get a medic, but Rebecca finally stilled herself as she came fully awake. She looked at Dunstan and Gerald, and the two of them seemed to know that something important had passed here. She collected herself and went to breakfast. It was just a dream, she told herself. Dreams couldn't hurt you. Dreams couldn't get you. Dreams were just dreams. There was no reason to worry anyone, because she was just having pre-exam jitters. It would all be over by the end of the day, one way or another.